Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Oops. How's everybody doing? Oh, that was weird. I had a hard drive pop up on my screen, and that was connected to some audio files. I closed the hard drive, and away went the audio. How you doing tonight? Today is Monday. We're back. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. It is September 15th, 257 days into the new year. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. Burning hot. Gates of hell, Burbank. It's been 110 degrees for the last 3-4 days. It's not going to end for the next couple of days. Installed misters on the patio at the house. Didn't help. No. It brought it down to about 100. It was just miserable. But, it could be worse. It could be worse. It's all right. I don't know. I'm looking over at Twitter now. One of the questions when it gets this hot that I pose to everybody is this. Would you rather be, I'm going to throw this out to Twitter right now. By the way, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Come hang out in the sandbox. We're all here. It's all great. And if you do have a specific question for me, that is hashtag F2BQ, Fade to Black Questions. Hashtag F2B2. F2BQ. F2B. Hashtag F2BQ. One of the questions that I have for everybody is, look, would you rather be stuck in Antarctica, Alaska, out in the frozen tundra, lost, no food, and in the just would you rather be like that with no hope? I mean, and go down for the count like that? Or would you rather be in the Sahara, lost, baking, no water, it's going down? Which way would you rather go out? It's a great question. Which way would you rather go out? Rich in Vegas says, I'd rather roast in the summer than freeze in the winter. Yeah. I just want to know. For me, the cold just bugs me. When you just can't thaw out, you can't warm up. I mean, which way? See, MC Ryder just said the cold. She'd rather be in the cold. Steve says in the heat. No question about it. Leslie says he'd rather be in the Antarctic. Moonchild says cold. Donna Colvin says, I can get into the shade. I don't know how to get water in the desert. Which way? Because neither of it is a good way to go. But if you're going to be stuck, So I don't mind this 115-degree weather that we have here. When you go to Vegas and you get off the plane and you walk outside and you go, oh, man, and it's 122. Okay. But when you're minus 20 in Montreal and you can't warm up, you can't get the room warm enough, you can't put on enough clothes, I don't know. But in the cold, you just go to sleep. From Ken Beck. Yeah, I guess somebody has heard that a couple of times this weekend. I don't know. And then somebody said to me this weekend, look, at least when you're cold, you can put clothes on. But when you're hot and you take it all off, where do you go next? Neither would rather be on a beach with a cold one. Yeah, see, I think the heat is the way to go. All right. Let's get this show cracking. We got Micha Hanks on tonight. Been waiting to get Micah on this show for a long time. Really enjoy his conversations. So tonight, Micha Hanks. We're going to find out tonight. Is it Micah? Is it Micah? Is it Micah? I'm going with Micah. I was talking to James Swagger earlier today. He gave me a call. He's back in country over in Ireland. Gave me a call. He calls him Micah. So I don't know. We were talking about that today. So I'm going to find out tonight. What is it? Is it Micah? Is it Micah? He's from the South. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm going Micah. I feel Micah. Somebody said earlier today it's Micah like the stone. So we'll find out tonight. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform. Yes, things are getting heated around the world. Our thoughts and prayers are always with you. No boots on the ground. But without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. They are out there protecting that Constitution of ours. Got a really long email from, you know what? I'll read it tomorrow, but man, I'll read it tomorrow. All about imperialism and our military and what are we doing? What are you doing, church? We need to dig to the bottom of this. We need your help to do that. I'll read the email tomorrow. It's too long. I was going to edit part of it today and read it, but we'll do it tomorrow. We got a really cool week lined up here, too, by the way. Really cool week. Next week is really cool, too, as well. Today, actor Tom Hardy is 37 years old. Who is Tom Hardy? Are you kidding me? He starred in Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy. He was great in that, actually. That's a great movie. He was in Inception. Awesome. Did a great job there. He was Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. But that's not his best role. Oh, no. No. His best role, Handsome Bob in Rock and Rolla. What's Eugene tweeting? Here we go. Caught my eye. Prepare to be almost Barra type. Angered by Micah's stance on ufology unless it's changed since yesterday. Eugene, why you got to go there? Doesn't even make any sense. What you just tweeted doesn't make any sense. Eugene's just trying to stir the pot. He's just trying to get everybody inflamed in the sandbox. And we're not even 8 minutes into the show. Eugene, come on. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make zero sense. Watch Eugene's next tweet. All right. You do. Follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio. Yeah, what a great Guy Ritchie movie. Yeah, that was a good one. Toby Kebbell. Follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio, #DMRadioNet. Come hang out with us. I understand today things are up and down and sideways with things, but we are live. We are good. Everything's cool. Website is up. Solar storm action came into play today, but Keith got it happening. Him and the boys over there got everything good. Okay. Facebook, YouTube. I got some cool Facebook stuff I'm going to read a little bit later on. There is some. I got a bunch of email this week. Somebody out there, I don't know who, Somebody out there is spreading the rumors that Jimmy Church is leaving the network, that it's all about big time stuff, and now that his podcast is launched and he's abandoning YouTube and the free stuff is over. I have no idea where these kind of perverted, twisted thoughts are coming from. Unless you hear it from me, it's BS. Okay? Anybody sends you an email, anybody sends you a direct message on Twitter, anybody tweets anything like that, and it doesn't come from me, it's BS. You understand? That is somebody that has not talked to me, whatever. And I got a bunch of it. So I don't know what's going on. Let me answer some questions. Nothing has changed. Do you have any other questions? Nothing is going to change. Any questions? Nothing is going to change. Am I clear? This show, this free show on this network will always be. That's it. End of story. That's it. I love YouTube. I love my family. I love dark matter. That's it. We have every one of us, you, me, Keith, Art, all of us have built this from the ground up. Nothing is going to change. The podcast was something that you asked for. That's it. So, yeah, you need a podcast. You want mobility. You want to be able to download. You want past episodes. You want easy reference. You want stuff on your iPhone, your iPad, your Kindle. That we answered. And that's the end of the story. It's over. It's done. Podcast is there. You asked for it. Cool. We did it. Pulled it off. Don't ask me how. Still not done, by the way. I uploaded, I keep saying I. There is no I here. It's all we. We uploaded all weekend and still didn't get it done. Still didn't get it done. We're close, though. I think we're up to, I think the number's around 90. We have 90 episodes up out of a $120, $122, $124. We have some missing. We have some lost episodes. So I will figure out a way to get those 2 or 3 lost episodes up too as well. We will get those up. But that's what the podcast is for. Not everybody can listen live. Not everybody can access YouTube or pay for bandwidth. The easiest way to do it is have a podcast. I get that. Apple, Windows, Android. I totally get that. Okay, so there you go. So what's changed? What could possibly change? I am not interested, everybody. This is a 3-minute rant. I've already wasted way too much breath on this. It's just a stupid subject. I'm not interested in doing a podcast. It's the live show where it's at. That gets your adrenaline going. Live. That's where it's at. The podcast is a facsimile of this show. It's a representation of what this show is. But live is the edge, man. You're walking that fine line. And that's what this show will always be. Okay? Are we clear? All right? If you get an email, a direct message, a tweet from anybody, I want to know. You just tell me because I'll nip it in the bud. All right? Where was I? That was all over Tom Hardy and Rock and Rolla. Where was I at? Oh. Oliver Stone today, 68 years old. How did Oliver make the cut? How is that possible? To get to the Jimmy Church Fade to Black birthday list, you got to be somebody like Tom Hardy. Got to be somebody. Oliver Stone, really? Was it JFK? Nope. Scarface, end of story. Oliver Stone, 68 years old. Unbelievable. All right. Are we clear? Fade to Black is my special purpose. I'm going to retweet that. Dale, that's good. Click. Retweet. Awesome. Very cool. All right, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Everything is fade to black. JChurchRadio, Jimmy Church, fade to black. Follow, like, subscribe. You know what to do. I am going to try. I think Micah will be down for this. Micah will be down for this. We'll take some calls later on tonight. Email throughout the show, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. That's what you want to do. Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. All right? Have you noticed? Oh. You know what? When I come back, let's just take a quick break. When I come back, I got some emails and talk about some cool stuff over at the website. Have you guys checked that out? You guys checked that out yet? It's pretty cool, huh? Do you know what I'm talking about? Ken Lipson does. Method does. Are you a real fade or not? Do you know what's going on over at the website? Huh? This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. We are back. It is Monday. Tonight, Micha Hanks and your calls. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. The adrenaline is pumping and the Starbucks is brewed. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us. Don't touch that mouse. I'll be back right after this.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Tonight, Micha Hanks. Somebody just tweeted Mika Hakkinen, Formula One. Not spelled the same. Nothing wrong with Mika, Hakkinen, or Hanks. Hey, they both, wow, MH. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. I didn't even think about it like that. All right. Over, I don't know if you have checked, if you are a real fade or not, if you're a fan of this show, you've got to go to JimmyChurchRadio.com and go to the Fade or Not page and check out the new artwork, the fresh stuff. We've got more. We haven't gotten to it yet, but fresh stuff over there, and it's good. It's good. And we are doing the invisible contest, by the way. Some of it is there. Some of it isn't. We did a preemptive strike. But go check out that artwork on that page. And So inspired. Method worked all weekend. I won't disclose what else we're working on with him, but man, that guy's good. Anyway, there's our new banner, our new header, courtesy of Method. I just saw it, and I was like, this is good stuff. So we had to do it. So if you haven't been over to jimmychurchradio.com, it's so fresh. It is. It's prudent. It's fresh. But go check out the Fade or Nots page. That gallery is just, it'll put a tear in your eye. We are all invisible from Ken. Just got a question in from Method, actually. Came in on F2BQ. Did I ever get a chance to use the Neve board over at Sound City? Now, that is Method. Boring question for everybody out there. But for me to read that, dude, that is a real question. Nobody knows what a Neve console is or Sound City. Sound City's right down the street. Spent many hours there, many long nights over there at Sound City. The answer is yes. And I won't bore anybody with any stories, but off the air, we'll share some of those. It's pretty crazy. Sound City is a little studio here in LA that it seems like all of the cool stuff out of the 80s, some 70s, Fleetwood Mac, but Ronnie James Dio, all that stuff. Oh, man, I can go on and on and on. Warrant, I can go just for, forever on what went on over there. So, Nirvana. So, there you go. Okay. Great question, though. F2BQ. Got a question for me? Send it in. It's 88. That's from Leslie. Ice, cold in space. Yes. Okay. Moving on. Facebook. Jeff Mahoney. He says, hey, guys, just checking to see if you guys know what happened to Clyde and his show tonight. He's talking about Friday. He was doing a live show, and all of a sudden his reruns air. Not sure if it's his health or what happened. A lot of peeps worry. Check out his Facebook page. Yes. Okay, so let me say this right now. I spoke to Clyde today. On Saturday, I spoke with Larry Overman. And so this is the deal. We tweeted out. Somebody here on Twitter, please retweet the Clyde Lewis crowdfunding page that is out there. This is what I would like to do. And the crowdfunding links are also on both of my Facebook pages, my personal page and the fan page, whatever that is, jimmychurchradio.com. And you'll see it. There's a picture of Clyde in his hospital bed in his glory. But I spoke with Clyde today for about, I don't know, maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. He's broadcasting tonight. He's back. He has, over the years, publicly and not so much, he's gone through a lot of health issues. Fought cancer a couple of times. He had this embolism a couple of weeks ago. He told me today he has spent the last week and a half in bed, in hospitals and at home, and that's it. He's done. He wants to stand up. He wants to go back to work. And I don't know if that's against the advice of his physicians or not. But I believe he's back on the air tonight. So what I would like all of us to do, this is one of our own. This is one of our family. And I don't see it on Twitter yet. So somebody please tweet the Clyde Lewis fundraising campaign. It's not much money. I think my last check today was Clyde was they're trying to raise $7,500. That's it. It's nothing to this family of ours. And I think he's up to I posted everything on Saturday. We popped out another $500. I think we're somewhere around the $6,000 mark. Just want to raise $7,500 by tomorrow. So get over, go to the crowdfunding page. He could really use the help. He's done a couple of ambulance runs this week and everything. I mean, he's got some medical bills. That's it. That's all I want to say. Clyde is part of us. This is a very small family. Okay? So I want everybody to just take the time to go click on that link and go and contribute what you can. By tomorrow, $7,500. And that if we can't raise $1,500 in 12 hours by tomorrow morning, let's do this. He needs the help. He does. I wouldn't ask. Okay? We have thousands and thousands of listeners right now that are listening to me. Go and do this. All right? And I'm looking now. I don't know if it's blasted past, but if the link hasn't been up, I will relink it during the break. Okay? And I'll get it up there. Please. That's it. Tomorrow, I want this number to be hit. If it's not hit, I'm going to have to reach in my pocketbook and I'll match. It's just the way that it is. Okay? $7,500 by tomorrow. You want me to kick it off? I'll kick it off. I'll pop a C note real quick. Okay? It's very important. Let's do this. All right. Facebook, Husk for Life. That's the poster. Husk for Life. He says, Jimmy, did that restaurant owner ever send you a pic of the mural he painted 5 years ago of the Malibu underwater base? Great question. He left me a voicemail today. That got posted on Facebook. I got a voicemail. More news on this tomorrow. Okay. Got an email in from Ben Miller. No, I'm sorry. This was from Renee. And it was about Gene Simmons. Check this out. Gene Simmons is about to launch a music reality show. Kiss Rocker. This is no joke. Kiss. I gotta focus. This is just too funny. Kiss rocker Gene Simmons is launching a new reality show called The Coliseum, which will pit bands against each other like Roman gladiators. Only Gene. Simmons will take on the judging role, acting as a rock Caesar, deciding the fate of the competing acts. The rocker says in a statement, and I quote here, Coliseum is a no-holds-barred competition show between musical gladiators in the arena fighting to survive, fighting to be the champion, fighting to curry the flavor of rock Caesar, end quote. So I guess dude is going to be thumbs up or thumbs down. Is that it? Lord. Gene. You know what, though? Family Jewels, I question that. Became a big hit. Rock School, question that. Hit. Kiss in general, you have to question that. Back in 1972, he had vision, I guess. Who is to question the marketing genius of Gene Simmons? Man. So, I will say this. Renee said, who's next to be honored? It would make an interesting game on Fade to Black. And I'm with her on that. But you know what I didn't say tonight, everybody? You know what I didn't say? I didn't say bacon. Over the weekend, while we were uploading, literally had 3 computers uploading for the podcast all weekend. There's a lot of stuff. And in between I got sucked into Twitter. And I couldn't buy, what night was that? Was that Saturday night? Was that last night? That was Saturday night, wasn't it? And for hours, I was cross-eyed. I had been in the studio from 8 a.m., and this was like 8 p.m. that night. It's 12 hours of uploading. And somehow we got on the subject of bacon. And we spent probably 2 or 3 hours with Gene just said it was a bacon Twitter fest. Oh, it was fun. It was fun. I can't believe that for all of us to just sit there. There was probably 50 of us all night. Ken, I'm watching that. Oh, no. Here we go, bacon. Yeah, it was a bacon Twitter fest. It was a lot of fun. All right. So with that, keep the guest requests coming. Everything this week is you. Tomorrow night, Courtney Brown. And new 9/11 stuff that we're going to be talking about tomorrow night. And what are we doing Wednesday? Wednesday, I can't even remember. Who's Wednesday? Oh, Grant Cameron. What am I even saying? And I see Fady right there with the bacon. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Welcome, everybody. When I come back after the break, that's right, Micha Hanks right here in the studio. Hey, get that Clyde Lewis link up. I want it up now. I'll be back right after this.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Yeah, welcome back. I was just looking. Yeah, okay. We got the Clyde Lewis stuff up. Sort of. I think it's right. I do want the Clyde Lewis links up. I'm goofing around here in the studio. I'm looking at all of these bacon pictures, and I got to tell you, I'm like hungry. And I'm being serious. So, where were we? Okay. Let's do this. Let me just jump into it. Let's just get this cracking. Micha Hanks is a writer, researcher, lecturer, and a radio personality whose work addresses a variety of areas, including history, politics, scientific theories, and unexplained phenomena. He's open-minded but skeptical in his approach. His research has examined a broad variety of subjects over the years. I'm looking at these calls coming in. I'm just going to ignore it. Did I say open lines? No open lines yet. It blocks my screen. His research has examined a broad variety of subjects over the years, incorporating interest in cultural studies, natural science, and scientific anomalies, and the prospects of our technological future as a species as influenced by science. He's the author of several books, including his 2012 New Page books released, The UFO Singularity. We are going to talk about that tonight, as well as Magic, Mysticism, and Molecule, The Search for Scientific Intelligence from Other Worlds. And also The Reynolds Mansion. We're going to talk about that, too, as well. It's a book I wish I would have written. Hanks is an executive editor of Intrepid Magazine, consulting editor, contributor for Fate Magazine, and the Journal of Anomalous Sciences. He also writes for a variety of other publications, including UFO Magazine, Mysterious Universe, and New Dawn. Hanks has appeared on numerous TV and radio programs, including Coast to Coast with George Norrie, Whitley Strieber's Dreamland, National Geographic's Paranatural, the History Channel's Guts and Bolts, CNN Radio, Jeff Rent, and many others. A weekly podcast, that follows his research is available at his popular website, which is, well, GraylingReport.com and also MicahHanks.com. In the heart of Appalachia near Asheville, North Carolina, I would like to welcome to the program the mouth of the South, Micha Hanks. Micah, how are you tonight, sir?
Hey, Jimmy, it's good to be on with you, man. Doing great.
Okay, we're going to settle this right now. Right now. How do you say your first name?
I think you've got it. It's Micah. Yeah, but I get a lot of them. And as a matter of fact, I'd wondered what was going on. My Twitter had exploded, and I see that there's this entire thread preceding the appearance tonight on your program with people wondering how it's pronounced. So to get the record straight once and forever, Micha Hanks.
We run through. It's one of the joys of having a sort of semi-successful little run here in Radio Land. We have a very, very large dedicated family, and it's great, and it's humbling. But Twitter and this show will run through tonight. We've probably done 500 tweets so far, and we're a half hour into the show. And
wow.
It's insane. It's insane. So you need to come and hang out one night and experience it. It is so much fun. It is so cool. So it is indeed Micah.
That is it.
Rhymes with Formica, right?
Oh, yeah. What? Never heard that before.
I don't know where that came from. So welcome to the program. So excited. And as you know, I've been, wanting to get you on for a while now. We finally narrowed down a day. We got it today. Welcome to the program. And let's do this thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Let's fade to black or into darkness, whichever.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we don't. Let's hope at the end we're fading into the light.
Yes.
Over at your website, and I go there all the time, by the way, and I check it out. And I was going through. If you don't mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
okay.
But you've got 2 or 3 really cool breaking news stories that I want to discuss. I want you to maybe present it news fashion. But before we get to that, and I'm referring to the stealth blimps and the sky rings over Mexico. I think that's interesting, and a couple of other things. But let's back up. What do you know about that crazy sighting over the East Bay in San Francisco Friday night, early Saturday morning?
Okay, now I will tell you this. I've been getting reports literally for days now about things that have been going on. I don't know that I've heard anything specifically about the one at the East Bay that you're talking about there, but a few of the things that people, especially in the California area, are telling me about right now. One gentleman who's in the Los Angeles area had said that there was just this incredibly, ridiculously large number of helicopters that he said flew over the residential area where he lives outside the LA suburbs. And he said that literally he heard them and was just thinking that maybe there was, 1 or 2 helicopters, and he keeps hearing these helicopters to the point that it causes him to step outside and go to try and look and see what they're doing. And he said that there was indeed a formation. He didn't know how many there were, but there were a lot. And who knows, that could have been a car chase or anything. But some of the other reports that we're getting are a little more interesting, a little more compelling. One that I think has to be my favorite, and this one's over at the website too. We can talk about it as well if you'd like, is a report of something that's kind of likened to a strange stealth blimp, 2 of them actually, that were tremendous, incredibly large. And these, again, were seen over Beaumont, California. So there have been a lot of things that people are reporting seeing over there. And I think the West Coast has kind of always been a hotbed for different things. I mean, going all the way back to the 1890s, there were the reports of the airships and things like that. And so it's not really surprising to me that we still hear about these reports. It's interesting how many of them remain unexplained or appear to represent aircraft that we don't, or at least have official acknowledgement of in terms of military craft and things like that. Now, Jimmy, fill me in. What was it that we were talking about specifically over the weekend over the East Bay area?
Yeah, my Twitter feed and Facebook and my cell phone is going off and text. I'm like, what is going on? And so a bunch of photographs were sent to me and a couple of videos. Now, what happened? It went all the way from apparently. Now, this is the thing. I'm a little confused about the direction and the trajectory. But by all accounts, it went up, not down.
Oh.
So, therefore, was it a meteorite? No. Now, I'll get to a couple of other specific descriptions that were pretty crazy. It has been triangulated to an origin of Southern California. And now, when I say East Bay, that means San Francisco. That's where all of the news reports from the mainstream media came from. I'll read you this. This came in on Twitter. This is at 6:08 a.m. on Saturday morning, the 12th. Or is the 12th? No, the 11th was Thursday. So this is Friday morning, 6:08. On my way to LAX, okay, that means Los Angeles, and me and Holly think we saw a comet burning up in the atmosphere. Really weird bright light with a cool white glow. Okay, and then at 6:09 he says, then it vanished. And this is another tweet, and this is from 6:52 a.m. I saw something streak across my windshield about the same time you posted this, but I'm in San Francisco. Okay, now here's another one. This is from Bay News Video, another tweet. Saw a bright orange light UFO over Bay Point, California, flying north by northeast at around 6:03 a.m. Anybody else see the same? Now, some of the other descriptions were, this one gentleman said he went out to his house and he distinctly saw steam or exhaust coming from the side of it. And he said he's never seen a meteor do this. And he also said that it was going up and not going down. Now, so if it's going up, could it be a missile from Vandenberg? Vandenberg says nothing. Nothing. They haven't fired anything. So that eliminates that. Apparently, it could be a secret mission that they're not reporting on too as well. Wow. But yeah, and the videos are crazy. And the other thing is some of the photographs. Now, I'm going to go over to Twitter real quick. I just posted to Twitter right before. So let me ask one of my Twitter family here, Walter, or anybody else, Dale, the tweet that I did a little bit earlier before the show, the multiple photographs, retweet that, please, so everybody can see what. It's great. Tonight I'm running solo in the studio. None of my producers are here.
But you sound as good as ever.
Well, what's funny is I can go, okay, let's tweet this, let's post this, okay, let's do this, and I can just bark, orders. Not tonight, man. I'm all alone in this. I've never done this. This is the first night I've ever completely run solo.
Oh, complete trial by fire. Huh?
Yeah, totally. So, but in one of the photographs, Micah, it has a blunt. There it is. Okay, Micah, are you on Twitter right now?
I am, and actually, I've pulled up the photos. I've actually got these in front of me. I think I'm looking at the very one you're talking about.
The blunt nose, right, with the flat front.
Very odd.
Is that crazy? Now, that's not a missile. That's and a meteorite would be round. And if you enter the atmosphere, aren't you going to get a little rounded? How could you maintain? I don't know. And like I said, it looks like the origin started here, like you were just saying, that Southern California hotspot area, and went north by northeast, crossed San Francisco, and continued up and out of the atmosphere. Yeah, that's pretty nuts. And
it is. I have to say, again, it's usually pretty easy. I'm kind of a backyard astronomer. I've got a nice telescope, and I like, on a cool, clear night to go outside and, observe the sky. Incredible stuff you'll see sometimes. Incredible. You can see certain nebula. You can see planets. Looking at Saturn is incredible. And I've actually had the good fortune of having something occur that very few. I don't know if very few, but it's not a common experience for backyard astronomers, let alone professional astronomers. And what it is actually having a meteor just kind of skirt across your field of vision while actually observing the heavens through a telescope. Now, I've seen all kinds of things, satellites, just all sorts of things. And it's usually pretty easy when the mainstream media starts reporting on a story like this and they go, what was the strange fireball? Which is really, these headlines constitute, basically clickbaiting, I think is one term that they use for it. Basically just trying to get people to read a story, and they'll call anything a UFO. And it's usually pretty easy within the first couple of lines to figure out what they're talking about. If by the end of this, article in question, whatever it may be, they haven't already just said that, experts are certain that it is this, but they're going to call it something else in the headline just so, again, more people will click on it. So with this story, it's interesting because people seem genuinely confused about what it was. It doesn't seem,
meteoritish. It doesn't seem meteoritish. We all know what a comet or a comet going through the atmosphere, but what a comet would look like in the night sky, and we know what a meteor. I mean, I think most of us. I certainly have seen a few meteors enter the atmosphere. I saw one about a year ago, and the crazy thing about this, it was in the middle of the day. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon here in the San Fernando Valley, out here in Burbank, and I see this thing smoking across the sky. Big, long smoke trail coming off the back of it. You could see a little bit of flame is the word I want to use, a little orange glow. And it looked so cool. I even thought for a second after it went by, I even heard it. And it was pretty low. It was, I don't know, 10,000 feet in the air. It was close enough to see detail on it. Anyway, me and some friends, we watched it just go all the way over the mountains on the north side of the valley towards the Mojave Desert, and it went down behind. It came down and went down behind the mountains, and I thought it was going to light up on the news. People were going to talk about this, and I'm ready to go meteor hunting.
Yeah,
it was right there in front of it. Nobody said a thing. It was just a meteor that went across the sky. Nobody mentioned it. And that's my point with this. If it was a meteor, then everybody would say it looked like a meteor. In fact, it wouldn't even make the news. And that's my point. You know what I mean? Meteor is no big deal. That is pretty trippy. And for that guy to describe the exhaust gases coming out of the side, what was that about?
Yeah. Well, there are a few images. One is the Garberville Airport apparently had one from what I presume was a surveillance camera. There are so many different angles and so many different photos that are appearing that, first of all, I have to presume that, and maybe we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that there were people with smartphones and things that were photographing these. It could have been all surveillance video for all we know, but this thing was apparently in the sky long enough that it managed to be photographed. A meteor typically streaking through the sky, Jimmy, like you were just describing, you see something like that, you can 9 times out of 10 be certain that it was a meteor. The rate, the direction, the travel, the path, the travel path, the way that, and literally the amount of time that it spends in the sky. I mean, again, this isn't hard to determine. What we have here is something that, based on the surveillance footage, one thing I would presume here is that probably knowing the frame rate on the camera and the fact that this thing appears at least in 1 or 2 frames in some of these images might actually give us a rough estimate about the actual speed it was traveling, maybe even the altitude. Certain things I think might be able to be determined, and there probably is other footage out there someplace of this thing. But seeing the number of photos, you think how often a meteor can be stuck or captured on camera when it's off-season. In other words, not in the middle of a meteor shower that you can expect to see these kinds of things, where someone set up a long exposure and you get the very familiar streak of light through the sky, or the occasional video of one that's burning as it's entering the atmosphere, but it's actually passing through, space within a few miles of where someone might be able to film it, and they actually manage to get it on film. There are circumstances where you can film a meteorite. Generally, it's kind of hard to do. This thing has been photographed profusely, and that's pretty interesting. It seems to suggest that this thing spent a little bit more time in the sky than a meteorite you would expect one to do. So that's interesting. And yeah, definitely has a very strange shape.
It's very strange. And Walter just, he says he thinks it was a failed satellite launch. Yeah. Oh, he inserted the word classified. A failed classified satellite launch. Yeah, and for it to come out of here, which we shoot things, off of the coast, military stuff all the time, and it's usually pretty obvious. I don't know. Have you ever seen a rocket launch? Have you ever seen one or missile launch in person?
Never seen one in person. I've always wanted to, though. Yeah.
I back in the 80s, I'm walking off the back porch of a friend of mine's house, and I look, and somebody goes, "Dude, what's that?" And I look, and all that went through my mind. This is what went through my mind. Armageddon. Okay, we're launching. Oh no, I'm serious. I panicked, and I watched this vapor trail, and it hung in the air for a good hour. I watched the separation of a couple of things, and that was pretty cool to see happen. And I watched it shoot straight up in the sky, but I didn't see any other missiles, so I calmed down. We did run in. This was in the mid 80s, and so back then, no internet, no cell phones, but ran in, turned on one of 3 television stations, and they all announced it was something out of Vandenberg. And so there you go. But I saw it, and what we're looking at here is nothing like what I saw. It was pretty amazing to see that in right in front of you in real time, just shoot up. It didn't take long either, Micah. I would say probably 15 seconds, and it was in the stars. Maybe 30 seconds, and it was gone. It was just into the blackness. Gone. Just straight up, man. Straight up and gone. Pretty fascinating to see.
Very interesting stuff, Yeah, it's interesting. I've never actually observed a missile launch, but having written about missile sightings of UFO, objects that appear to resemble missiles and torpedoes and rockets and things like that with my book, The Ghost Rockets, I've actually taken a good amount of time to familiarize myself with these kind of reports, and not just, reports of things that may be errant missile fires or something like that. I think that drones kind of come into question here, and a lot of other things. Now, in relation to what was photographed over California over the weekend, that again does not look like a drone. If I had to guess on something, I would say that this is some sort of a freak situation involving a meteor or something like that is behaving unlike something that you would expect to see. It could happen. Maybe we need more information. But, from time to time, I think that for national security reasons, obviously there are certain things that air bases and, launch sites like Vandenberg, will not probably be forthcoming with. A good example that involves a satellite actually was, there's the famous story of the UFO that was seen during the Apollo mission, and Buzz and Neil Armstrong and the guys are up there and everything. And they report seeing something that they had actually thought might have been a discarded panel. They weren't quite sure, but they actually managed to get it in the telescope and observe it. What is believed now, according to a new biography about Neil Armstrong that just recently was released, there is an allegation made by the author in that book, and this was reported a few weeks ago, that an inside source had told him while the book was being written that indeed what it actually was a spy satellite. And this is why the astronauts would not have been able to account for what was actually being seen, and in likelihood, the same reason that there might have been some secrecy about what was seen and speculation after the fact. It may have been that the astronauts were doing the best that they could to speculate about what they'd seen. They may have been briefed and were told not to actually specifically disclose what it was, but in likelihood, this source says that this was a spy satellite. And these kinds of things certainly do happen, and there's probably a history that most of us really generally are not aware of in relation to the use of spy satellites, secret launches, and technologies and things that I think in relation to what I've called across the board, borrowing from the old classical UFO term from the 1940s of ghost rockets seen over Sweden. I think some of these quote-unquote ghost rockets and mystery missiles from time to time are probably related to just that, secret launches that are carried out in secret for reasons of national security. And boy, if we weren't at a time where there would be need for national security like the present, I couldn't think of a better time. I mean, with everything we've got going on with ISIS or ISIL, issues with Russia and the Ukraine, there's a lot going on in the world right now,
Well, and back then there wasn't that many satellites up there.
Right.
I mean, now there's, I have no idea, tens of thousands. It's certainly a huge number. We're firing up. It seems like we're firing 50 a day or something.
Yeah.
but back then, if you're looking out the window and you see something, well, you're looking at, there's definitely something there. And I've often wondered with their description, and it kind of, I think I just saw it pop up a few seconds ago on Twitter, the Black Knight satellite.
Yeah.
That was certainly up there. Well, rumored to be up there. If anything was going to be up there, it would have been that. And I have no idea how many satellites were fired up by 1969 when Apollo 11 took that ride, but it couldn't have been many. Dozens, and what are the odds of running into one?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, When it comes to the history, though, of these kinds of things, you bring up the black satellite, and I don't profess to be any expert on this, but actually, I think I can say this much, that I have a few friends actually in the space program, and I asked one of them about that, and they had believed that this was actually, I think, basically the remains of a rocket launch that had been discarded that were being tracked, and the reason for the discrepancy in the time that it apparently appeared was because of actually a data entry issue that had occurred in relation to the tables about the dates of launches and the like. That may not seem satisfactory to some people. The legend surrounding the Black Knight is that I think that it was, first of all, wasn't it a retrograde orbit? Basically, it was traveling the opposite.
Yeah, it was north to south pole.
Right. Yeah, it was an interesting circumstance. Now things very similar to that have been observed. And I think, for instance, that Jacques Vallee, of course, information scientist, and of course, maybe one of the most brilliant UFO researchers ever. I certainly think so.
He's an alien.
He'd have to be an alien.
He's an alien. Look at him. Look at his eyes. He's an alien. He's an alien.
I know. Yeah, he's that or he's a Time Lord. I'm not sure. It's one of the two.
One of the two. He's never going to come on this show. He knows I want him on this show. No, he's the one guy. It's funny that you brought him up. He's the one guy out of every. I mean, he just stops me in my tracks. I listen to every noun and verb. I want to just absorb everything that he says. Old, new, doesn't matter to me. I mean, Jacques freaks me out. But I look at him while he's speaking, and those shifty eyes and those lips. Anyway, I love Jacques. Jacques is the best.
Oh, he is. He's incredible. I mean, he's made some very hopeful statements, about maybe some new information. That's actually really, I think it's probably better termed as the proper treatment of old information. That really, I think, is hopeful, at very least in terms of helping us maybe learn some new things about the state of UFOs, the broad number of phenomena that probably actually constitute what we call UFOs on the whole. I'll bring up Jacques because, of course, he kind of began in France as a astronomer and working with, tracking objects and things like this. And it was that early experience he had where there was an object that was tracked that didn't behave consistently with known objects in space. And then, of course, that information was basically dumped after the fact because his superiors didn't want to have to, basically have to present an explanation about this. It was a very, very embarrassing circumstance, and it really piqued his interest and made him kind of say, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe we should take into consideration that there are unknowns, whatever those unknowns may be, things that are out there capable of flying or orbiting Earth or God knows what else that we can't account for. And the important thing that Jacques brings to the table is not only maybe he hasn't done it perfectly. There are people in the skeptical camp that are extremely critical of him, as you'd expect. But I find that Jacques is someone who has consistently tried, like Dr. Bruce Maccabee, to apply science to the study of UFOs. And he's one of the key proponents right now of trying to collect all the anecdotal data that we've collected since the mid-'40s on this subject and try and do statistical analysis of this so that we can actually come to some sort of a scientific determination, or at least try and draw patterns, and correlations between seemingly related phenomena that may give us a few clues. It's not solve the mystery. I think this is so far beyond us, Jimmy. We don't have the tools right now to be able to solve it. But I think what we do have is we at least have enough data that we can start using and interpreting. Certainly we could learn some new things if we would.
There's one thing about Jacques, though. He is so quick to dismiss certain theories and support and talk about his own theories that it makes me step back and I pause and I wonder if he knows something that we don't. And he can't talk about it. And he has certainly been silent more so than he was in the 70s, certainly. The last 15, 20, 25 years, he's been very non-public about it. And I just wonder. I wonder if he is privy to something.
If you wanted me to speculate on that, I could tell you what I think.
Go. Fly a mission. Drop a bomb. Come on, Micah. Bring it.
This is what I think. It's interesting that you bring that up, Jimmy. I do think that maybe Jacques Vallee, I think that maybe he is privy to certain things. Now, I can qualify that statement and say that it would probably be in relation to confidential material, but maybe not of a governmental variety. I think that, Jacques Vallee, a lot of people are really skeptical, or if not skeptical, maybe cynical. The suspicious is an even better word of guys like Robert Bigelow, who is essentially, I think, a UFO entrepreneur. He has a genuine interest in UFOs, probably as a result of an experience early in his life with his family. He has made a fortune. He's been a successful businessman, and now he applies that towards studying UFOs. Why? Because probably if that technology could be better understood, it could also be innovated, marketed, developed, and profited from. And I know that people look at him with suspicion because of that, but I think that it's a very interesting and practical kind of, in a strange way, actually it's not that strange at all. It's an entirely practical way of trying to study something. We seem to have a technology before us that we might be able to learn something from. Why not study it and try and replicate it? By virtue of his connection with Bigelow, I think that Jacques Vallee probably is privy to certain things that people like Bigelow and his National Institute for Discovery Sciences, have collected, but data that they would not necessarily want made fully publicly available. Again, maybe for reasons other than, shadowy MIB government secrecy. And I think that in that capacity, maybe if not through Bigelow, through other individuals and organizations that Vallee has probably worked with, there is certainly information that maybe would be extremely useful if publicly available, but for reasons that maybe they understand and maybe we will at some point, I'm pretty sure that they probably withhold from general public dissemination. And I think that, Jacques probably would be in the loop about a few things. He'd have to be after all this time and all the accomplishments, that he's made, the leaps and bounds in this field of study. And naturally, people who have that kind of information would want to go to him with that. So but that's just speculating.
Well, I don't want to kick a dead horse, but when it came to Close Encounters and Vallee and Hynek and Spielberg and the way that was presented to the public like it was with some very, very, if it was fiction and it was extremely creative, out of left field, and I'm talking about from the music to the tones to the GPS coordinates and the way that all of that was presented, it just seemed a little bit too real. It was so left field, but and then when you consider who was consulting on it, it just makes you wonder. Maybe, just maybe, Jacques knows something. I don't. When you hear Jacques talk about Terence McKenna, or you hear him speak about other researchers and their conclusions on the UFO hypothesis, it seems like he was always leaning in one direction fairly freely and then closing down other areas like he knew something. And that's the way he comes across to me. And I will never change that view. I can't wait to get him on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll be listening when you get him, too, because I'm just like you. I literally want to hear everything that he has to say.
I was, by the way, James Swagger told me to tell you hi. I spoke I spoke to him earlier today. You came up, and there you go. I wanted to talk a little bit about your book, UFO Singularity. And the reason for that is I went over the last couple of weeks, I went and researched not only the book, but your comments and questions on it over the last couple of weeks. And I will say this, so I'm going to get you to be very focused and clear on this.
Sure.
With other interviewers, it's very easy to let the conversation go left or right. And I think you guys are always having fun in your interviews. And I think for me, I never walked away with a clear definition of what you were trying to say with the definition of UFO singularity. We know what singularity is. And for everybody out there, I'll just explain really quick. It's the point of no return, where machines and computers now will surpass the intelligence of the human race. And so that's what singularity is. Some say, Kurzweil says it's going to happen anywhere from 2017 to 2030. I think everybody is pretty focused on that with the rate of change and the speed of computers and so forth. So that's where we're at now. I hope it's not 2017. That's a little bit too close for me. That's inside of my comfort zone. Let's start there. What is your definition of the UFO singularity?
Well, the idea of a UFO singularity would be this in its simplest essence. We seem to be presented with UFO phenomena. And again, I think that there could be many things that constitute UFOs, but when I talk about it, I think the ones that we're all interested in are what appear to be technologically advanced, exotic, maybe even, aircraft, or at least something that we perceive in our space-time reality as behaving like aircraft. What we would mean by a UFO singularity is the idea that much as there is a point beyond which our trend toward technological superiority, talking about humans, gets greater than exponential, and we get to a point where literally we create technologies that are capable of intelligence, self-awareness, maybe even self-replication, and then the technology maybe even begins to escape us to an extent. We're kind of already looking at a technology that really escapes the full human understanding with UFO phenomena. And I think that really, in a way, the idea of Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near, to me, is in a funny way really best represented by the apparent presence of UFOs, a phenomena that literally is so advanced that it could almost seem futuristic. And that has led some commentators to actually speculate that UFOs may be representative of a technology that has traveled into our space-time reality from some point in the future. But when it comes to the discussion of time travel, I don't want to just make it sound like, okay, UFO singularity just means that Micah thinks that UFOs are time travelers from the future. I think that we can safely speculate that could be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And again, people who would be detractors and say that, well, you can't speculate about time travel, and furthermore, you have no proof that there are UFOs. Again, we don't have hard physical proof that would satisfy physicists, chemists, biologists, but we do have anecdotal evidence that seems to support there being a little more than just purely misidentifications of very prosaic things. If we can take at least for granted that there are probably exotic technologies that seem to go beyond what we know to exist, one of 2 or 3 scenarios seems likely to me. And any of these could fall under this idea of a UFO singularity, that A, there is technology here on Earth that far surpasses what we know to exist already, which may really akin to Kurzweil's definition of singularity, may be already nearing that point of, bridging man and machine. We may be dealing with some sort of a technology that is from someplace else, not Earth, i.e. extraterrestrial, or it could indeed be something that would be close to home, terrestrial, but again, emanating from not in this present space-time, more likely the technological future, or what we would perceive as the future. So for me, UFO singularity is just the representation of a technology that seems to be far beyond what we recognize right now, and our problem, is to try and or rather what we would try to overcome is to understand the source of that. If there is such a thing as a source, we would recognize it in our space-time reality. And it gets a little deep, but that's in essence, I think, what we're dealing with. And I do think, Jimmy, that it's a little broader than just being able to say that we're talking about time travelers. And I say that because technology on down the road, or maybe existent elsewhere in our universe, could already overcome many of the hurdles that we would perceive about multidimensional travel, space-time, warping, and these kinds of things, which we perceive as being impossible right now. Our level of technology probably cannot account for those things, but that doesn't mean that one day on down the road, either that we won't do it or maybe that someone else already has.
What do you think we're seeing? And the possibility of us visiting ourselves, totally. I'm right there. That is as strong as anything. But that, for me, doesn't explain everything. And some of it is black ops, sure, absolutely. Some of it is that. There's no question that the YF-12A or the SR-71 or the U-2 in the 50s being sighted somewhere, the F-117, the B-2, all of these could be confused when you've never seen one before and suddenly you do. And I have, and it did confuse the crap out of me when I did. Yeah. But that doesn't explain everything. What is it that you think? I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of sightings a year all around the globe. What is it that we're seeing?
When you talk about hundreds of thousands of sightings, my friend Nick Redfern and I have talked about this. Back in the day, when Jim and Coral Lorenzen, with the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, which later, of course, kind of split apart, and then MUFON grew out of that. When they were investigating the UFO phenomena, traveling all around the world, consulting with science, experts in various fields, of the sciences, and were trying to document this phenomena, I think that their general goal was to prove that what was believed at the time was that some of these things were extraterrestrial. Now, that requires a bit of a leap in judgment to presume, but it's certainly a possibility. If I had to tell you, though, what I think these things are, I would first say that of the hundreds of thousands of sightings, it's interesting that there were so many nuts and bolts descriptions back in the old days. And while we still have a few of those, especially the great big giant, silent triangles and things like that, it seems that there's a lot of ambiguity with UFOs, things that could be this or could be that, and really are little more than just kind of ambiguous lights in the sky. Nick Redfern is limited, as I've talked about it too. Some of my colleagues and friends in the field, including Richard Dolan, are a little less apt to say that the phenomena seems to have diminished, or it seems to have become more ambiguous, and really that there are good reports, but maybe that we're just oversaturated thanks to media and the way that it's expressed these days. And we hear about a lot more things that have been ongoing but which may not truly represent what we would call the real good hardcore nuts and bolts UFO phenomena. Now, if I had to guess what a lot of these were, I'd say the majority are probably some sort of government operations. I have, at least at times, speculated about extra-governmental technologies and agencies or organizations, and that's a really difficult thing to try and understand without the kind of funding that would come through government, which makes still, I think, government and black ops programs a more likely scenario. But there could possibly be nascent technologies that have been in development behind the scenes that somebody else had been utilizing in an extra-governmental fashion. That seems far out, but it's certainly not impossible. And then finally, I think that we have to look at UFOs and we have to look at the behavior of based on eyewitness reports that seems to really defy our known physics, and which more specifically seems to manipulate something in ways that we can't understand, that we further don't understand, which is gravity. I've wondered sometimes, Jimmy, if really the gravitational component in relation to the really high strangeness UFO reports, the really exotic ones, is not indicative so much of aircraft as it is some kind of a technology, maybe even emanating from what some perceive as being another dimension or a parallel world, which could be a technology that manipulates gravity and or bends or warps space-time, which could, relative to our three-dimensional perspective of what we call space-time, it could be manipulating gravity or other physical forces, but in a way that we would perceive as being flight. And the reason that I think about that from time to time is because UFOs, in addition to what appears to be flight, are capable of moving through water, and some people even say that they'll attempt to phase shift through matter and can even pass directly into the ground, which seems to suggest that there's a little something stranger going on than just objects that are flying around. It seems almost more like these things are capable of moving in any direction through space and time that they so choose, and sometimes can even bend the will of what we call, Newtonian physics. And so it's very interesting to me. There could be a multidimensional component to it, and that could also involve, to an extent, what we might call, non-temporal technology or something, like time travel without being us from the future. It could be another technology that utilizes that from someplace else, another dimension, another world, who knows. But I still think that while there's a good possibility that a minority of these may be representative of that kind of a thing, that probably, my gut tells me a lot of this stuff is actually from right here on planet Earth, and there's a lot more technology working behind the scenes than most of us are aware of.
The original UFO hypothesis, that today, I think all of us, when we look at the original UFO hypothesis, it seems that I think we can dismiss it. I don't want to be the poo-poo guy, but the thought of just jumping in a spaceship 20 million light years away, 20 light years away, whatever that distance could possibly be from another solar system to get here, inside the Milky Way to get here, another galaxy to get here, that in a traditional sense, pumping up full of gas and going, seems a little outrageous. That's hard to put our mind around now. In the 1950s, 1960s, looking at it, we didn't have any answers. But today, no. And where I'm going is this. Do you think what we are seeing here also could be something that would be from the traditional UFO hypothesis, something that has traveled literally 10,000 light years?
There's always that possibility. There really is, And in relation to the traditional UFO hypothesis, I consider it to be a little outdated, and I'll tell you why.
Well, so do I, but I would love to hear your view.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really simple perspective that I have about that in relation to why I think it's outdated. I think that really, again, right after the Second World War, but before we had succeeded in getting up into space, traveling to the moon, we were not a spacefaring civilization, but we had already begun to speculate about the strategic advantages of space travel and space exploration. There were documents, I think Norio Hayakawa had actually, I think it was he who had actually posted these things online. But they were released, I think, last year, and they were talking about the plans for a lunar base. And a lot of people would look at this and go, aha, see, they were talking about trying to do this in the 50s. They could do it now. Well, maybe they could, but maybe they wouldn't. And part of the reason I think that they wouldn't would be that, building a lunar base wouldn't necessarily serve the same function that it was believed that it might have been able to do. Speculating about how simple or difficult space travel might have been in the 1950s, but if it were able to be achieved and were carried out fairly simply, it would be obviously of a strategic advantage during the Cold War. Now, many people are saying we're going into another Cold War right now. For all you or I know, maybe there is a moon base up there, but it doesn't seem that it was carried out. There are documents that exist that support that there was an idea to do one. Well, interestingly, there are also documents that talk about, speculation prior to our entrance into space ourselves. There was speculation about what space travel might afford us and what it would be like and what we could do and what some of the hurdles of being able to enter space might be. One of the early ideas was that we might not be able to even enter space safely because of the Van Allen radiation belts, and that trying to travel through the radiation belts might literally kill a living organism. And hence, that is reflected in the early speculation about extraterrestrial hypotheses in relation to UFOs. For example, one of the ideas, and this is a classic and I love this, was that there was a mothership parked outside our atmosphere that was sending drones down so that they could pass safely through radiation belts and travel in our atmosphere and report back information via remote control by a mothership parked outside our atmosphere. And as a non-spacefaring civilization ourselves, it seems only logical that we would look at something that appears to be able to travel from some place in the sky and takes off into the sky and they fly off into the distance and disappear. If it seems to be flying and it seems to be, coming from and going to the sky, we naturally presume they must be from space. We haven't been in space ourselves. We've got a lot of ideas and a very few facts about what space travel may really entail. It just seemed logical that we would presume that, well, we're going to get there in a few decades, but somebody's already doing it and they must be them. When in fact, again, that was a logical leap based on our expectations of what space travel would eventually become. Now, having been a space civilization, having entered space, been to the moon, we've got a space station up there. I think we've got a lot more data. And if there were a mothership parked outside Earth's atmosphere, unless it's utilizing some sort of highly advanced cloaking technology, which could be the case, you never know.
Yep.
We'd probably have a clearer idea if that's what was the case. And I think that's why modern science seems to be a lot more dismissive of UFOs, because what they're being dismissive of is the idea of this classic extraterrestrial UFO component. Basically, our science does not account for that with the knowledge that we have, attained in the last half century since the first UFO sightings. I don't think it rules out, however, the existence of UFOs, and that's the problem, is that we've got to try and redefine this phenomenon so that when I say to Neil deGrasse Tyson, UFO, he doesn't roll his eyes and go, look, there's no evidence of aliens. I'd have to say, I'm not saying it's aliens.
Right. I've heard him say that too. It bothers me because he's a cool guy. Well, this is my take. This is how my twisted brain works. Everything that you just said, spot on the money. But this is the way that I look at it, and I don't mean to be cavalier or dismissive or funny, but as you reach the speed of light, let's not even go that far. Or whatever, you are in a metal ship firing across the universe, the known universe. At that speed, the tiniest little pebble, the tiniest little thing is a big problem. And you are impacting lots of stuff. I just don't, if you're going to impact something cruising slower, okay, that's another issue. But what would happen to your ship at that kind of speed? Now you're talking about catastrophic nuclear-sized explosions happening all the time. That's why I don't think they would travel here in a conventional means. I just don't. They would certainly figure out a way to get here in a couple of minutes and not travel at the speed of light or twice the speed of light for 1,000 years. I don't think that it would happen that way. I don't. Yeah. I think the technology is 1 billion years in front of us, let alone 10,000 years. And they figured out a way to just get it done, where they're just going to blip, blip, and be here. And they're not traveling like that in the conventional means. And that's why I think the UFO hypothesis, although that thought in 1940, 1945, 1950, well, yeah, okay, we didn't have another way to look at it. It was all in a conventional means. But and that's my take. And I'm sticking to it. I really feel like they would just be stepping into a door and then stepping out another door, and just arriving here. They're not traveling here.
Yeah, we have to conform to these ideas like the breakdown of physical space or the warping or bending of it. Mm-hmm. The idea of trying to create an engine that could and again, I think our physicists pretty much understand that. Okay, yeah, travel at light speed is probably going to be extremely difficult to achieve more likely impossible and almost certainly impossible. As a matter of fact, not even certainly impossible. We're just going to say you can flat rule it out that a physical life form is going to be able to be carried through space at the speed of light without, compression occurring that would literally obliterate it. And that would probably, like you said, Jimmy, happen, much sooner before you even near light speed.
Right.
So we'd have to be thinking about different kinds of technologies that could get around these kinds of things. And as little as we understand, we think we've got all the answers, but I come back to gravity. Gravity keeps interesting me more and more as time goes on. The less and less I realize we really understand about what gravity is, how we study and measure it. Is it a force? Is it an attractant force that is exerted by objects? Is it as Einstein kind of speculated? I mean, is gravity really a measure of the physical warpage of space by a mass as represented by an object? I mean, what is it? What role does it play? And as we better understand it, how can it like, the wind, catching a sail and carrying a sailing vessel, how can gravity be used to maybe, if not propel us through space, help us to find other things that are useful and purposeful in terms of transportation, study, maybe energy systems, all these kinds of things. I think that gravity and understanding very basic, things that we exhibit, or rather that we could exhibit it, but we actually experience them every single day here on planet Earth. Those things, as little understood as they are, probably hold the key to a lot of this, and yet we really don't have all the answers. And literally, you cannot walk down the street without experiencing gravity every day. Everywhere you are at all times, you're experiencing the effect of this incredible, mysterious force. That blows my mind, and it's right under our noses, literally.
I still have yet, and I've had some pretty smart guys on this show, real smart guy. I'm a doofus. I have yet to have a real explanation of gravity. I'm serious. I don't even think the smartest guys on this planet really know what it is and how it works. We are way, 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 way far away from understanding gravity. You know what? And let me back up. You actually touched on a really good point there. Bob Lazar, when Bob Lazar first in his very first descriptions of everything, when he came forward, it was all about gravity, and his explanations of it. And as far out back then, when he was bringing it up in these contexts and how we were tumbling through and the space, the gravity drives and what was it, whatever, element 115. But today, when you go back and listen to the old tapes of Bob, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like, dude was right. It's really weird. You kind of listen, and his explanation back then in 1991, 1992, 1993, and you listen to it today with what we know about physics today and what we know about the universe today, his explanation of those propulsion systems and how they did manipulate space, it's kind of weird. He's almost spot on the money.
I've noticed that too, Jimmy. It's good that you bring that up because most people tend to take a really dismissive attitude toward Bob Lazar. Stanton Friedman, and I never want to seem like I'm someone who's just criticizing Stanton Friedman because, I've interviewed Stanton numerous times. I've met him at least twice. And, he and Richard Dolan and I did a panel together, the three of us at the 2013 International UFO Congress. And he's a great guy. I like him a lot. But I also know that Stanton, and I know this, I asked him about it directly, in relation to Bob Lazar, a simple search for his educational background did not match what Bob Lazar claimed he had done. End of story. I know Stanton had also been a little more apt to believe the MJ-12 stuff. And it's kind of interesting because, you might say that he's done the most research in relation to the background with Bob Lazar. And some would say that he also has been most beholden to the null, theory in relation to Majestic 12, which most UFO researchers, and myself included, really don't think is much. I would say, though, that, and it's not a matter of judgment, it's just that when he says that he can quickly and easily prove that Bob Lazar is not telling the truth about what he says happened to him, I would not rule out personally the idea that maybe certain information about an individual's past could be wiped if it was felt that the information would be dangerous for national security reasons. And the kind of clearance position that Lazar purportedly had would seem to warrant that kind of clearance. To me, I look at that guy And there are videos of him online. And this is something I should ask you about. Have you happened to see any of the recent videos of him, and the kind of things he's doing? I mean, the little science projects and stuff he's still involved with?
Yep. I'm in communication with Bob.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. He's still involved in science, and he's still kind of off the grid, so to speak. He's still selling, Geiger counters and stuff through his website. He seems to me to be a very interesting person, and there's obviously a man, whether he's some sort of a wacky mad scientist or a guy who actually has the background that he says that he had. There's something to the story. There's something to it. It may not be everything that we think it is, but there's got to be something to that story. And, Nick or George Knapp, somebody else I really respect, George seems to really, I think he thinks there's more to that story just as well. And the things he's said in the last couple of years about Bob Lazar seem to pretty much mirror what I'm talking about. He thinks he's a guy who's kind of made some bad decisions, like the whole story about the brothel and all that. And this has unfortunately really been easily used to discredit this man. Maybe Stanton Friedman's right. Maybe there is no educational background and maybe there's no conspiracy to cover it up. But, again, this is a guy who seems to actually have the kind of technical prowess and knowledge that would be required of the sorts of things that he was talking about in the 80s.
Well, I've often said the truth is always in the details. And with Bob, he can stand that. You know who else does it really, really well? Who I've in a strange way, I believe every word, and that's Bishago. But back to Bob. Bob, the truth is in the details, and Bob was able to straight face, look into the camera or the crowd. He did that one famous speech out in Rachel, Nevada, the alien, and went and absolutely matter of fact have the details of everything. What was the color of the floors? What was on the walls? What clothes were you wearing that day? What was on the countertop? What was this? And he was able to just answer, bam, 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 bam. And to me, it's the truth is in the details. You can tell if somebody's going to be vague, and stretch the truth on something or completely fabricate, they don't have those kind of details. And that was the one thing with Bob. You were waiting for him to trip himself up. That's the thing. And he never did. And I believe me, I have gone back. I've watched every single piece of Bob Lazar video at least 50 times. And I'm talking about years worth of watching. And I have tried to, I feel more confident today about Bob than ever before. And normally it would be the other way. The faith would wane.
Yeah. It seems that there is something. It seems that there's something. He's obviously an intelligent man. I guess that there's one other possible explanation to some of this. And that could be that he is a highly intelligent individual, maybe even an educated individual who has been purposefully, and again, I know people might roll their eyes and say conspiracy theory, but, it's important to entertain different possibilities. Maybe, since we've seen this sort of thing in the past with people like Richard Doty,
Yep.
It could very well be that, Bob Lazar is somebody who is just as if not intent upon, he has been instructed to help muddy the waters, so to speak. And unfortunately, this is the component in relation to, and if I had to trust my gut, I'd say that didn't seem as likely to me as just that this guy actually had some sort of background, was involved in some of these projects and saw some of this stuff. I don't know. But that's at least a possible explanation to this. And again, that underscores the real, absolutely undeniable component in relation to UFO studies that many researchers overlook entirely, and that is the PSYOP component. I mean, I'm convinced that there have been careful planning and management, at very least, of information in relation to UFOs and perceived UFO phenomena that has been utilized for purpose of dissuading the public from thinking certain things, convincing them of others, and all in a way that is very carefully orchestrated to, distract us from what's actually going on. And at the heart of it, the more and more I think that there's actually government technologies being employed and PSYOPs being utilized very carefully to control public perception of the phenomenon. I guess I'm still interested in it, but, I think, I would love to have come into this and found evidence of extraterrestrials or something like that, and be a real UFO believer. I see less and less of it as time goes on. I see more and more of the management and the control of information for purposes of steering consciousness publicly, for certain, whatever goals.
Oh, that goes on every single day.
It really
goes on. It doesn't even have to be about UFOs.
Yeah.
That goes on every single day. But let's back up to your point with Bob. If disinfo comes into the picture, or if he's telling the truth comes into the picture. Now, let's not put any gray area in the middle. Let's go with the two extremes. He's either telling the truth or he's a disinfo agent. What is going on right now in Michigan with his company is government contracts. So, if he's and also his employment with Raytheon, okay? Now, how could that be possible if he is full of crap and made it up? So, therefore, you erase the gray area in the middle, that part of Bob. If it's true or if it's disinfo, certainly the government is standing firmly behind him with government contracts out of his company in Michigan. And so that adds fuel to that fire about him and his background. And obviously the government is comfortable with giving him money. And so and Raytheon doesn't have an issue with hiring him. If all of this was BS, I don't think either would touch him. And that's another scary part about Bob. Let's not ignore what the real facts are.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, again, he is an individual who obviously has the technical knowledge that is requisite for, and also, to an extent, the business savvy to be able to manage companies that have continued, even after the whole UFO thing, have continued to see him doing government work and also work with science and technology. He's obviously not somebody, a know-nothing with no
photo developer in Las Vegas that installs video systems at brothels. No, that's not what we're talking about here.
Seems to be a little more to it than that. Yeah.
Just a little. Like I said, today I'm more confident about him than I was. How do we get off on a Bob Lazar tangent? I love doing this show. That is just great.
Well, he's interesting. It's a very interesting subject. I mean, I'm just as fascinated with him as you are, Jimmy. And I don't mind bringing up people like that. Because I mean, sometimes in a strange kind of way, I think that there are more answers that can be ascertained about a lot of this phenomena by looking at people like Lazar and what role he may or may not play in relation to all this.
Yeah, he shot me an email. A few months ago. And it was really funny. I'm not going to disclose, most of it's private. But he did say one thing that raised an eyebrow. He goes, Jimmy, what would we talk about? And I was like, what would we talk about? He said, yeah, but, the past is the past. It's all out there. It's all out there. What will we, I said, Bob, what we want to know is what you're doing today. What are you doing? You've been gone for 20 years. That's it was really funny how he was so comfortable in himself. He didn't defend his position. He didn't, anything like that. He was just like, dude, what would we talk about? It's all out there. I've said all I can say. And that to me was as impressive as anything else. It wasn't a long diatribe about anything. It was very short and to the point. I was very impressed.
Yeah. I mean, it just, to me, doesn't seem to really indicate a person who is, he's either really, really, really good at deception or he's really, really, really bad at it.
Yeah, right. My producers have been telling me I've got to do a station ID. I haven't done it for 45 minutes. This is KJCR, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We are talking to the mouth of the South, Micha Hanks, not to be confused with any Micha Hanks that are running around out there. This is Micah. All right. Let's... you, to me, are kind of like the man's man. All of your books are about the cool stuff, and you write about what you want to write about, and I think that is really great. And you don't show any boundaries, and I think that is really, really cool. And
thank you.
I want you to please tell me about the Reynolds Mansion. And
the Reynolds Mansion book is one that I'm a lot less often asked about. And the story about that is quite simply this. I got a phone call from my dear friend Marty Marfia a few years ago, and she had called to tell me that she was now gainfully employed at a wonderful new establishment. And she had always, worked snazzy jobs and lived in snazzy houses and stuff. She's a real cool person. And she was working at this newly renovated bed and breakfast outside of Asheville, North Carolina, It's called the Reynolds Mansion Bed and Breakfast, and it is one of the oldest buildings. I think it was built in 1847, one of the oldest buildings in this area. And immediately I wanted to go see it and everything, but I had a busy day, and she said, well, could you not come over? I could arrange for a tour like this afternoon. And I'm like, oh, Marty, I really shouldn't. I got a lot of junk going on. And well, of course, I've learned, and I say so in the book, I've learned since not to engage in a battle of charms with Marty Marfia, because, I'm going to end up losing. And I ended up about 2 hours later over there at this incredible house. And so the owner, Billy Sanders, meets me at the door, and Marty and I ride over together. And we're talking about a 3-story, like 19 rooms, incredible old house. And hell yes, they say it's haunted. And I got into this like a lot of people. I'm best known as a UFO researcher, but that book, by the way, is a history book, the Reynolds Mansion book. But, in telling the story of the mansion, its occupants, the incredible history of that house, there was no way to escape a few of the good ghost stories. And there was this incredible, from the minute I walked in, this incredible Dark Shadows feel. You remember Dark Shadows, right?
Oh, love it.
Love that show, yeah. And so that whole winter I holed up and I was writing that. And that book actually was written mostly before and then immediately after I finished the UFO Singularity. So it's kind of funny. I put that project on hold while I was writing the UFO Singularity and then immediately picked it up and finished. That book was, written in over the course of a winter and into the following year. And I was watching old Dark Shadows episodes as I was writing it to get into this kind of a gothic feel. And it's just a really unique experience, to be able to have basically free reign of an old house that was built in 1847. And the owner said, yeah, we'd love to have the history of the house written, and you can come over and you can stay the night. And so literally I spent many a night in the old drawing room or in the library. But what was so cool is that Billy, the owner, he's got a very interesting kind of a sense of decor. And here's this old house. He has restored it, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And it looks like it probably did, for the most part, back when it was, occupied in the late 1800s, early 1900s, But there's this, it's at first subtle, and then as you go through the house, you find it more and more prevalent. But there's a very subtle macabre element. Like, for instance, when I arrived on the front porch, there are Venus flytraps and carnivorous plants all over the place.
Right on.
There are carnivorous plants all over the place on the interior of the house as well. There's like, there are bottles of wine, that are like, vampire red and stuff. I'm like, this decidedly very kind of creepy something going on here, Paintings that had been commissioned by an artist in Chicago that represent everything from Gone with the Wind, Vivian Leigh and the famous actors and actresses, to a literal representation of the picture of Dorian Gray, both before and after. But my favorite of all was a replica of the painting of Barnabas Collins that hung on the wall at Collinwood. And I'm just like, man, what incredible style. So I fell in love with the house. Billy he was always like, when we haven't got too many guests, come over and stay anytime you want to. And I'd just spend nights. I'd stay up late and I'd just hang around. I'm the only guy in the house, walking around all alone, drinking a glass of wine and just waiting for it to happen. I thought, if I'm ever going to see a ghost or something like that, here's where it's going to happen. And I'm that guy, I'm the most average guy in the world. I think that's why I write about this sort of stuff, Jimmy, is because I'm fascinated by the possibility. And I'm not really a big fan of ghost hunting. I used to kind of be into that when I was younger. And my analytical, logical, skeptical mind these days does not rule out the possibility that there are fluxes in space-time and things that happen that account for the historical interpretations of spirit phenomena and ghosts. But I have not found evidence that you can take a little, Gaussmaster or an electromagnetic field detector that is already calibrated to detect, I should say inorganic EM fields and electric fields and the like. For instance, leakage from a microwave oven or from a fluorescent light or something like that, and that these are somehow going to pick up some sort of an energetic presence produced by the spirit manifestation absent of a biological body. It seems really silly, and there are a lot of logical leaps that have to be made in order to presume that actually happens. So to me, I say put down all the meters and all that junk, and learn the history of a place. And if people say that they're seeing ghosts, they're trying to understand the history of the home, which is what I did with that book. And I managed to tell a few ghost stories along the way. And I find it really interesting. And I still go by Reynolds Mansion very often. I'll stop in, have a glass of tea, see how everybody's doing. It's the kind of place you just want to be because it's really, really awesome.
It's about the scariest place ever. I don't know if I'd spend the night. Tell me, and I'm looking. It's all over Twitter right now. The picture. Did anything strange happen
while I was there at the house?
Yeah, of course.
there had been things, and at the end of the book, what I actually decided I would do, I one of my dearest friends came and assisted with a seance that we did, and also my co-hosts of my podcast, Marty was there. We all participated in the Dark Shadows style seance at the house. Not necessarily because I thought that we were going to be conjuring spirits, but Dr. Andrew Nichols, it's kind of interesting to talk about parapsychology because, I've spent a little time down at the Rhine Institute, and I know a number of people who've worked with the Institute over the years. The Rhine Institute for Consciousness Studies, which essentially has been devoted to studying parapsychology since the 1930s, when it was founded by J.B. Rhine. I have actually maintained an interest in parapsychology. I don't write about it quite as often, and so I don't get to talk about this all that much, and it's interesting to me. Dr. Andrew Nichols had actually written extensively about the idea of doing basically a seance for purpose of a kind of a psychological experiment. His whole feeling was that he thought that often people essentially haunt themselves, and people who move into a haunted house. You hear about these a lot in the news recently. I think Zach Baggins, or Bagans, whatever you pronounce his name. I don't really watch these ghost shows, but I think Zach bought one of these mystery homes up there, that had been purportedly the site of an exorcism.
Wasn't it? Yeah,
stuff.
I think he bought it. Was it Detroit or Chicago?
Yeah. I mean, that was a pretty freaky story. But
yeah,
again,
it was.
Dr. Nichols, Andrew Nichols' perspective on all this seems to be more that he, thinks that people sometimes can psych themselves up, and that through the creation of a de-psyching, through an actual, what he calls a seance, he feels that there are sometimes ways that people can learn to cope with what they perceive as being a phenomena and literally unhaunt a house. He's written about this a bit. And so I was interested in trying to get the owners of the house and people who worked there to participate in this seance to see how it might change their perspective of the phenomena. But while we were doing this seance, interesting things did happen.
This just sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah,
it
terrible.
Just sounds like a bad idea.
I mean, we're in this huge old Victorian mansion, and oh, well, what could possibly go wrong? Now, one of my listeners had sent me a Ouija board in the mail that he wanted me to sign, and he was sending it to different people, different, writers and things, and he was having it mailed to each one of them and having them sign it. Well, while I had it in my possession, we used it in this seance, and a couple of interesting things that happened. We were in the master bedroom of the house, which Daniel Reynolds, who built the home, this had been his master bedroom. Now, people who have stayed in that room have said that they never see a spirit, an apparition per se, but they will dream. And many people, apparently, I'd say, at least, maybe half a dozen have said that they've had dreams in that room. And one of them was most interesting to me was a woman had said that she had dreamt that there was a man standing in the doorway. There's a door that's always kept shut now, but it used to connect the master bedroom to the library on the other side. And she said that the man was angry, and he kept saying that he wanted the door to be open. So there are interesting stories like that, and we chose that room to begin with. And while we were in that room, we had a very strange thing happen where the lights suddenly dimmed, seemingly of their own accord, and continued to flicker, and did not stop until we were done with the seance, which is almost like something you expect to see in the movies,
Right.
It's an old house. There are probably a lot of reasons why that could happen, but we're all kind of going, this is interesting. And the only significant thing that seemed to come about through the Ouija board experiment was that, it basically would rest, the Ouija, the planchette kept resting itself on the letter I. And that could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It wasn't particularly revelatory. We didn't get a name or anything like that, but it just kept resting on I. And it just wanted to stay on I. Strange. I don't know. So, I'd say it was an eerie experience, but I'm not convinced that, I'm one of these people that has these experiences. I do know a psychic who claims that she'd seen a little girl there in the house, all kinds of things. And it's really interesting. And whether or not you're somebody who believes in or sees ghosts, again, I find it fascinating to go to an old home like this. It was at one time, get this, in the 1920s, it was actually literally converted into a sanitarium. And TB patients and the like were treated there. It's just had an incredible history. There was a former Apollo engineer named Ralph Gates who bought it in the 60s, and he went into a corn husk broom, or rather a corn straw broom production company that he housed in the house. I mean, there've been everything from astronauts to senators who've lived there. It's just an incredible old place. So, but I'd bet whether or not I see them that if there's anywhere in the world where you're going to find ghosts, Reynolds Mansion is where it would be.
Okay. Have you ever you've written a couple of books about this. Have you ever seen a ghost?
I have not. See, that's the thing. I don't know that I could say that I've seen a UFO either. I'm like pretty much the lamest guy in the world.
No. We're going to talk about the Brown Mountain Lights. So let's hold off on that statement because I'll contest you on that one. But let's back up. So you've never seen a ghost?
I have never seen what I would perceive as being an apparitional form. Now, I've worked with a lot of people. For instance, off and on throughout the year, a fellow by the name of Joshua P. Warren lives here in town. He's, of course, well known as a paranormal investigator. Josh and I have known each other for years. And back when I was more interested in the possibility, I have become more skeptical over the years. There's no joke about that, And I'm not a debunker or dissuader. I'm just someone who tries to apply a lot of rational thought to this. But, there have been times over the years that I've worked with people like Joshua in relation to these kinds of things. And Josh, he had told this interesting story about seeing some sort of a strange grayish purple mist just swirling in midair in the attic of an old home that he and another investigator were looking into. And he managed to photograph this thing.
I've seen it. When he was on the show, we took a look at those pictures. Pretty crazy. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
It is. He had that firsthand experience. I've never seen anything myself, but I know people who have had, strange things happen to them like that. And I know numerous people, and I recount some of these stories in the Reynolds Mansion book, people who have seen what appear to be basically specters or ghosts, I guess, by the classical definition, at Reynolds Mansion. What's interesting is that when these things appear, we're talking about a person who tends to be wearing period clothing, who seems to be completely unaware of what's going on around them in relation to you or I or the waking world. And one line of thought that I've tried to apply to this is if there is such a thing as ghostly phenomenon, if it could exist, and if something like that is actually happening at a location like Reynolds Mansion or any place else, is it that for some reason that kind of an environment can allow for some people access to kind of an informational matrix that is stored within the actual physical space?
Sure.
That works as a replay of some past event. Now,
sure.
Interesting observation here. While we might be able to speculate loosely that UFOs are representative of what we might call a ghost from the future or an apparition of the future, we could try and speculate about what an apparition from the future might look like. But really, I hope I'm not being too bold in saying that we just don't hear a lot about people saying, I saw a ghost and it looked like a man in a silvery suit or something. Most what we call perceived ghostly phenomenon is a replay of a past event, which is in keeping with the entropic laws of the universe, is described by Stephen Hawking, in that we as humans, by virtue of the way that entropy has effect on the human mind remembers the past. We don't remember the future because our minds perceive reality in the same direction in which entropy increases. And hence, we remember the past, but we are not all walking around as precogs, although people who claim that they can actually sense the future, maybe they're somehow getting around that. But if I would guess this, that if entropy has anything to do with this, that would explain why what we perceive as ghosts are always in keeping with the way that memory function works as well. It's the past that we're perceiving, because whatever this phenomena is, just like our ability to memorize or to remember things and perceive space and time, it functions in the same direction in which entropy increases as well.
But isn't it the same thing? And it certainly wouldn't make the sighting or the vision any less terrifying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's what's really freaky, is that there are some people who say that rather than being just like a replaying of a past event, they claim that they have interactions with these manifestations. A couple of guys were renovating an old house where a woman had just passed away. The story was that this was a house that was in Black Mountain, which is the next town over, from where I live in Asheville, North Carolina. And interestingly, the same town that is the hometown in the book written by William Forstchen 1 second after about the EMP strike. Well, in this little house, a woman had passed away, and they found this strange chamber, this kind of thing up in the attic, and they weren't sure exactly what this was. It almost looked like some sort of a containment something. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what that was. It was almost kind of like a great big sarcophagus. But anyway.
Like an iron lung or something?
Yeah, and it didn't really have anything to do with the story other than that it was just really weird. There were weird things about the house. But this woman had lived alone for a long time. They presumed that whatever this thing was something that it was a collectible that her husband had. And when they began to renovate the house following her death, two of the men who were working in the hallway painting one day claimed that they had heard a voice of a little woman right behind them. Right behind them, that had said, "I don't like what you're doing with my house." And so some people do seem to have this kind of an interactive kind of thing, which to me is the real creepy kind of ghostly experiment. The last thing you want to do is wake up in the middle of the night and see some weird old guy standing there at the foot of the bed staring at you saying, I don't want you in my house,
Yeah, get out. Eugene just tweeted, he said, yeah, but what about Slender Man and all the other ghosts that aren't past events?
Slender Man, you got to remember, Slender Man is a really interesting case. This apparently, I think it was the website Creepypasta that
Yep. Still, that website is so wrong. I don't know if you've ever gone and read it, but it will. That'll cause some nightmares.
Yeah. Let's just invite people to dream up the most horrific stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, and but as far as I understand with the Slender Man thing, and I've talked with a few people, David Weatherly and others, who kind of take a folkloric perspective toward this. What it seems to be with regard to Slender Man is that yes, this is just something that was cooked up. It was an urban legend that was designed, and we actually know the man who created it, and it was disseminated through creepypasta. And maybe other websites too. The problem is that this mythos about there being a proxy for Slender, and that somehow susceptible young adolescent children seem to think that it's a good idea to become proxies to Slender. Again, this is not reality. What's sad is that what people are misperceiving as reality, they're acting on. And these young impressionable teenagers, again, there was a news story just a few hours ago where I believe the judge has determined that the two girls in this most famous, the stabbing that almost resulted in the death of a girl, that the two girls are found to be fully mentally capable, and that they are not considered, children with, or the primary suspect being a child with a some sort of a learning disability or anything like that. There doesn't seem to be any deficiency, and they will be tried as fully mentally capable individuals. What leads to a person trying to carry out an action like that? To me, Slender Man is not a ghost, coming back to your question. It is something that is stranger, a phenomena that has bridged the gap between fiction and fact by virtue of people who are willing to perpetrate the reality of the myth itself, and that is really unsettling.
You remember, I can't believe I'm brain farting right now.
That's okay.
The Fantastic Planet. When in that, it was all a creation of your own mind. Forbidden Planet. Oh. And so couldn't Slender Man also just be focused energy once it's out there on the internet? Eugene just said it was referenced 9,000 years ago. I don't know about that, but once all of everybody's, your brains are focused, could you just manifest this and create this and the energy be there for somebody else to see? And I think Barry Taft talks about this too as well. And you mentioned this earlier. There could be a digital recording of all of the past events out there, and we're accessing it somehow. It's in the ether. I get that. But if everybody just focuses long enough on this image of Slender Man on creepypasta, that it could be manifested and created?
Well, again, we look at certain physics experiments, like the double slit experiment, which seems to show that our observation of occurrences in reality can sometimes be influential in relation to what actually physically transpires, i.e., light behaving variously as a particle and also as a wave. If the act of observation has some sort of a strange role in the way that matter behaves, and this is again highly speculative, but there have been certain philosophers and physicists who have speculated that maybe for instance, to use a classical example, what a medium may be actually doing is creating some sort of an experience by what you just said, Jimmy, essentially a manifestation of something, of an experience. We couldn't say that that's impossible. It may seem to be not in keeping with, again, Newtonian physics, although with quantum physics, we do seem to see that there are a lot of things. And yes, that the observational role has something to do with the actual actions, that are carried out and observable. And it's really weird because, again, I don't think that we fully understand physics, but if I had to guess what role humans play in all this and why it could, hold a few answers as to what can happen, could there be things that are literally manifested, the idea of what some people call a tulpa? This is a Tibetan concept that's been around for for centuries. But, if I had to guess that there's anything that's happening, it's that probably what we perceive as reality is essentially humans being something apart from the physical that we experience and we perceive, and that consciousness stems from someplace else, but that like a person who can occasionally put on a glove, we are representative of the hand that enters the glove. The body is the glove, and humans come and go from time to time trying on gloves. And during the time that we have a glove on, consciousness enters a physical form in which it is capable of manipulating matter. And we are capable of interacting with matter in this, what we perceive as a space-time reality. It could very well be, though, that there's a lot more to it, and behind every glove there is a hand that is required to move it independently, if you follow my analogy there. And so, I wonder sometimes, and maybe the idea of a manifestation of something is possible, but that's kind of freaky, because then I think about all these horror movies that we watch, and I wonder, my God, if we focus our intent on these kinds of things, are we creating terror in the world around us?
Right.
Are we really capable of that?
That's exactly my point. And when you mentioned Zach Bagans earlier, we should call him right now. I've got his number. We should get him on the air, or Joshua for that matter. With the ability, this whole electronic EVP phenomena, which is out there now, it just like with UFOs and sightings around the world, where you have hundreds of thousands of sightings. There's a phenomenon there going on that we just can't explain a lot of it. Some of it we can. But with EVPs as well, there's something going on there. Some of it can be dismissed. Some of it is a deliberate hoax. But some of it is real. And that is the part where it seems to me like a lot of this is connected. Where there is Sasquatch, there's a UFO. Where there is a ghost, there is a UFO. Where there is strange lights that manifest and disappear, everything is kind of connected and could possibly be connected to one thing. It could be the mind in general that is not only seeing this, but drawing it in from another dimension, another parallel world or universe, if you will, and it all could be connected. And then you throw into, I hate to do it, but throw in ayahuasca and the ability to see and connect into other dimensions. Could all of this be connected and then possibly answered by science?
Yeah, and I think that maybe it is. Again, the ayahuasca thing is really interesting, and that's one reason that I began to look at UFOs independent from abduction experiences, because the hallucinatory experiences that are achieved and can be attained through the use of ayahuasca, entheogens, God-releasing substances and the like, seems to mirror at times, not always, but there are times where the quote-unquote classical alien abduction experience seems to be mirrored by the visionary experience. And so one thing that I've always, tried to look at is that when you see parallels between phenomena and you see a wholly different set of circumstances that seems to be able to replicate something that is purportedly happening in relation to another phenomena, i.e. UFOs and abductions, again, if the abduction experience seems to be able to occur non-exclusively in relation to various things, and it's not always just attached to UFOs. In other words, if an abduction is what we might call it, could occur without there ever being a UFO sighting or a landing, then do we necessarily need to draw a parallel at all times between these two perceived phenomena? And my answer to that is simply this: no. I think that we can look at the purported abduction or the interaction with or the encounter with the non-human culturally as being a phenomena really unto itself, because of that interesting parallel in that people who take ayahuasca and they have these crazy visionary experiences often describe very similar things. Maybe not 100%, but then again, there's not any real 100% cohesion between the different reports of purported alien encounters in relation to UFO captives and things like that just as well. I mean, you may variously find in an abduction lore, for instance, reference to quote-unquote humans that are the epitome of their gender, reptilians, greys, light beings, robot-type things like what appeared in the Pascagoula, Mississippi abduction of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker in 1973.
Right.
Any number of different, representations, I guess. And to me, what that says is that, there isn't some sort of a single, clear, consistent phenomena. All there is a clear and consistent interpretation of this as being a abduction. And it doesn't seem to always have to occur in relation to UFOs. Like with the Hickson and Parker encounter, there certainly was an unidentified flying object that landed, and they said they were taking aboard this damn thing.
Right.
But some people have experiences very similar to that, and that in no way seem to involve a UFO. And so we have to kind of draw distinctions between the phenomena. And it's interesting because, ayahuasca seems to open a lot of doors to interpretation of that as being something that's kind of standalone, maybe even something that occurs more within the mind than in the physical reality. That is the non-human-human interaction.
I do find it fascinating when we're talking about ayahuasca specific. I don't know how we've gotten off onto this tangent. I'm sorry about that. But when I have read countless descriptions of different persons' ayahuasca experiences, not only at different times, but also completely different parts of the world, not always exclusively in the Amazon. But they are very, very descriptive and it's almost like the stories are interchangeable.
Yeah.
And that I find fascinating with marijuana or LSD or whatever you want to any other type of drug out there. It's a story, it's an experience. But with ayahuasca, it seems to be very, very, very specific and very narrow. It's pretty fascinating how it seems to be accessing what the experiencer is saying. That's the fascinating thing. And I don't know how experienced you are in research of ayahuasca. I certainly have never done it, but it's what everybody is talking about now. I was on Bill Burns' show earlier today with Alejandro Rojas, great guy, and I called him up and so it's Jimmy Church on the line. Hey Jimmy, what's going on, man? I said, I just drank a cup of ayahuasca, But I think I think science, if it does apply to certain, if they just took some focus and we could find out actually what's going on, and we don't. We have a lot of knowledge. We do. We've got a lot of knowledge out there. We've got a lot of ways in a clinical setting of exploring a lot of different things. Not only the UFO experience, but let's talk about Sasquatch. And nobody really wants to. And I'm on the fence about Sasquatch. I really am. But and ghost and all of this phenomena that seems to be, as we start to peel away a couple of layers, possibly related, and we just don't go there. Science just doesn't care.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up Sasquatch again. There's some very interesting literature in relation to Sasquatch, and recently I've begun to kind of change my perspective on some of that just as well. I came into this like a lot of people thinking, oh yeah, there's a Bigfoot out there, UFOs are aliens from outer space, ghosts probably live in every haunted house. I've trimmed that back a lot, and I acknowledge there are phenomena we don't understand what it is. Most of the so-called investigation of this phenomena is largely pseudoscientific and silly, but the underlying phenomena, though, although it may not be all that it's cracked up to be, there is probably something as evidenced by the consistency of these things in our culture. Now, Bigfoot is a good example, because you go to England and you look in medieval literature, and you have what were called the woodwoses, basically the perpetuation of the hairy man or the wild man myth. But what is the root of the myth? Is this really a cultural holdover from our ancient human ancestors and their interactions with the Neanderthal or something like this? Or is it a representation of a phenomenon that has continued and is still even represented by something physical in existence today? John Napier, who I think is one of the most intelligent commentators on the Bigfoot subject in the last half century, back in, I think, 1972, he wrote a book it had a really unique title. It was called Bigfoot. And Napier, he was a British primatologist with the Smithsonian, and he was largely a skeptical researcher, and he wrote this book, and he came to two fundamental determinations in this book. And one was that he did not think that there was very much to substantiate the idea of an abominable snowman, a Yeti, in the Himalayas. But that with regard to almost say UFOs, listen to me,
They're all connected. I told you. I told you.
With regard to Bigfoot, he said the anecdotal evidence, and he was actually the very one, I actually mentioned this, paraphrased this earlier. He was the very one that said that there is anecdotal evidence that must account for something. It wouldn't satisfy the hard physical scientists, the biologists, the physicists, the chemists. This is not physical data. We don't have a body, but we have enough reports from credible witnesses that describe a phenomenon that is similar from report to report enough that there has to be something to it. And his actual words were, and this was interesting, and I always kind of wondered what he meant by this. He says, Bigfoot, may not be all that it's cracked up to be, but I'm convinced that there's a real phenomena underlying it, a real physical, tangible phenomena. And this was the determination of John Napier based on his skeptical review of the evidence. He didn't buy, back in 72, when it was still fresh on everyone's mind, he didn't buy the
Patterson film?
The Patterson Gimlin footage.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd been skeptical of it and gone back and forth. I know that he was certainly very skeptical of the Ray Wallace footprints that were found in Bluff Creek, which, only just a few years ago were definitively proven to be a hoax. He was convinced, basically, as a primatologist, that those footprints were bogus. And he really, I find it interesting to see what his perspectives were in 1972, because he seemed to be skeptical of a lot of the same things that we in modern times have allowed science to prove to us and to our liking were probably hoaxes. He seemed to be just as appraised of the more likely and the less likely elements of the quote-unquote proof available before us as of 1972, and still came to this conclusion that the anecdotal evidence seems to support that there's something out there people are seeing. And Jimmy, I feel the exact same. I have talked with people, credible people, really credible people, and even close friends of my family who have said, I've seen these things. One story that just blew my mind. I was probably 15 years old when I was told this, but there was a guy. My dad actually is an Episcopal priest now, and he's a real scholar. He's a smart guy. Can translate Latin, Greek, Hebrew, all these kinds of things. Brilliant dude. And the first guy when I was about 5 years old that gave me books about this subject. Ivan Sanderson's Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life, and also Peter Byrne, the British Bigfoot researcher. He wrote a book called Bigfoot, Man, Myth, or Monster, and those two books were given to me at a very early age. And my dad, back when he was in high school in the 60s, actually played in a rock group here in Asheville, North Carolina called the Satyrs, and the drummer was a guy named Bruce Smith. And Bruce still lives here in town. And I remember we went to visit Bruce and his wife when I was in my early teens. And my mom had said, you should talk to Bruce about the thing he saw out in Madison County. And I said, oh, what's this then? Well, what did he see? And Mom said, you should just talk to him. I think it was like a wild man. And I'm thinking, a wild man? And so Bruce recounted the story to my younger brother and I, because we asked about it. And it's not like, okay, Uncle Bruce, tell us about the Bigfoot you saw. No, he said, tell us about the thing that you saw. And he said, God, I hadn't thought about that in years. He says, my cousin and I were walking up the hill. It was after dark, or just after sundown. And there was a chicken house up on the hill that my aunt had said, let's go up there, you guys go get some eggs, and I'm going to make eggs and biscuits and stuff for dinner. And as my cousin and I were walking up the hill, we see what we perceived as being a bear that was raiding the chicken coop. And so we start making noise and throwing sticks and stuff because we want to get this bear out of there. And he says that the thing came out of the chicken coop. The door had been opened. And as it stood straight up, it stood head and shoulders above the 6-foot-tall chicken coop. And the thing stood and looked at us. And he said as it ran off into the woods on two legs, it began dropping eggs. And he said that the clearest things that we saw in the half light were that this thing appeared to be covered in hair all over, but that it had he said the hands were long and white, and so was the face, white. But the hands were really crooked looking. He said there was something funny about them. They looked real crooked. And he kind of stopped at that point, and you could tell it was almost unsettling or just baffling to him. He goes, for all I know, it could have been some crazy old man. I don't know. And that was how the story ended. Crazy old man covered in hair that stood, head and shoulders above a 6-foot-tall chicken coop with crooked, wicked-looking, weird hands dropping eggs as it ran off into the forest. It was a weird story.
Yeah, Bigfoot is it's a paradox, and I'll tell you why. For me, if ufology had the Patterson film, it would be case closed.
Mm-hmm.
It would be done. It would be over. UFO. Yep, there would be no arguing the point. And the Bigfoot phenomenon has got the Patterson film in its corner. I really feel when I look at the Patterson film that it's real. It's genuine. There's nothing about that feels funky to me. We know when we're looking at something fake, and we've all seen Charlton Heston in Planet of the Apes. We know when something is fake. But the Patterson Gimli film, you look at that, and there's no dead. It feels right. It feels natural, and I think it's genuine. So for me, and I'm totally perplexed, and this is the paradox. We have that. That is some bona fide, show me the evidence. Well, I'm showing you this, but we don't have anything else to back it up. There has nothing. We don't have a body. We don't have a bone. We have got Neanderthal skulls. We've got 200,000-year-old skulls all over this planet. We can dig them up in your own backyard. They're everywhere, but we don't have a Bigfoot skull. We don't have Bigfoot poop. We don't have Bigfoot hair. We don't have Bigfoot anything. And that's the paradox. I just don't get it. I want to be that guy that is I would be the flag waver, if there was something there, but there's not. But they have the film. It's like this crazy paradox. We don't have that in ufology. We don't have that definitive piece of footage. And I don't know what to do about it. Hey, do you mind? You want to take a couple of quick calls?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, let's bang out. They've been going off all night, and I've been ignoring them. So let's do our first one. This is Fade to Black. You're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church and Micha Hanks. Who's calling? Where are you calling from?
This is Mickey from California.
Hi, Mickey from California. How are you tonight? Everything good?
Oh yeah, everything's good. Just listening to your show, pretty interesting. You guys are talking about most stuff that I'm pretty interested in, and a lot of other people are. I just wanted to ask if you guys were familiar with.
Stay with us, Mickey.
You lost him, huh?
I think we lost him. Okay, all right. Sorry about that, Mickey. You're gone. Yeah, he is gone. He is indeed gone. Okay, well, but I will say this for Mickey. That's the one thing, having you on the show, we can talk about all of those things that interest everybody. That's the beauty of it. Okay, what do you think, though, about Bigfoot? And exactly what I'm trying to say here is that they have some fantastic evidence in that footage, but there hasn't been anything else to back it up over the years.
Well, let's look at that footage really quickly. It's interesting because the dirt in relation to that story seems to be that, we don't know the film lab where it was produced or how, according to the timeline that Patterson and Gimlin gave us in relation to when the film was made and how quickly it was produced and how quickly they were able to come forward and say, we've got this film that's been, it's been processed and we have the footage now available to play. There seems to be a lot of discrepancies. And while they have not been caught in a lie, people have said that it would seemingly be impossible. I think that the official story that Patterson gave was that there was a private lab that had developed the film for them that weekend. Again, that seems to be a little problematic for a number of reasons. And the late Mark Trovinsky, Peter Byrne, a number of researchers have looked into that component. The footage, I have to say, is pretty good. And we've seen what faked Bigfoot footage looks like. Most of us have. We've seen people's best attempts, even with modern special effects, to recreate the Patterson-Gimlin footage. I've never seen something that is capable of successfully making anything that looks as good as what we see in that film. And to have been made by two men, presumably on an extreme budget, with a 16-millimeter camera in Bluff Creek in 1968, I mean, that is mind-boggling to me that something could be made that looks that good, because really we take for granted how difficult it is actually to fake something. Now, the reason that most people say that it's so obviously a fake is because the skeptic-minded person, and I'm a very skeptic-minded person, but that's why I think I'm qualified to say this, we will tend to look at this and we'll say that couldn't possibly be a Bigfoot. And hence, we have to look at this as being a person in a suit. And no matter how good it looks, it is a person in a suit. problem with that logic is, of course, that it's not taking into account one possibility, and that is that there is actually a creature being represented in what's in that film.
Right.
When the skeptic mind is so sure to dismiss something without actual evidence, and again, the skeptic would tell you, the modern skeptic, or the big S skeptic as some call them, would say that no, we don't have to defend our skepticism because you're the one presenting this footage who is making the bold claim. We don't have to make support for our bold claim. You have to be able to support your bold claim, and nothing, according to science, will bend to that, and therefore we have to presume that this could not be a Bigfoot, and hence it's got to be the more likely possibility, a person in a suit. But that is not something that is provable. And for all we know, based on the anecdotal evidence that people have continued to bring forth over the years, the footage that we're seeing there may indeed be an accurate representation of this phenomena that people have observed. And, again, that would explain why it seems to look so good. Now, there was the skeptical book that Cal Korff and Greg Long wrote a few years ago that basically debunked the entire thing, they said. But I noticed at the time, and I've subsequently even seen on the Wikipedia article in relation to the Patterson Gimlin footage, that book contradicts itself in a couple of places. There are numerous contradictions. One, of course, is that there was a man named Philip Morris, I believe, a costume maker in Charlotte, North Carolina, who had made the costume that was used.
Yep.
But the man who purportedly wore it, Bob Hieronymus, claimed that it had actually been partially made from horsehide and that it stunk when he wore it.
Right.
And it seems that it's funny that the skeptics who write this book about this are grasping at straws to find any narrative that they can use to explain the story, and they end up actually contradicting themselves in minor areas and creating a narrative that actually has more holes than the original story that was put forth by Patterson and Gimlin themselves. So I think the verdict is very much still out on that film, and I think that it's indeed potentially some good evidence, but no amount of stabilization and image enhancement has managed to convince the skeptics, despite the science that's been applied and the technology that's been applied to trying to improve the quality of that footage. Jimmy, I should ask you, what do you think of the stabilization?
I love the stabilization, and for any of the, those skeptics that go, well, look, check out the gate now. Look at the stabilization. It's obvious. No, the stabilization makes it look perfect, and I think it is even more convincing. And Dave Matherly, a friend of the show, he just tweeted, he says, I was a makeup FX artist before CGI artist. John Chambers said he built that suit, and he was a pro. He worked here at Universal Studios, and he did the Planet of the Apes films. And when Chambers came out and said that, I laughed, because when you watch that, Planet of the Apes films were state-of-the-art. You remember how they bragged about, it's so realistic. It's just amazing. Wait till you see it. And I watched Planet of the... Now, it's still one of my favorite films, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But you look at it and you laugh, and you just allow your creativity and your imagination and the great story to guide you through the film. It's not the convincing ape suits. No, because they were fake ape suits, and it looked retarded. In the Patterson film... You can't, the flowing hair, the walk, the boobs, the just everything about it. There's no gloves, there's no seams, there's no zipper, there's nothing, and when I look at stuff like the Patterson film or anything, you just look at it and you just want to just tear it apart and go, okay, you can convince yourself that it's fake in no time at all. It's no problem. You can't do that with the Patterson film.
It seems a little difficult to do. And although there have been skeptics who I respect very much, like John Napier, who seem to be a little more or a little less easily, persuaded by that footage after his very careful analysis. I know many people who are primatologists, and this is something else, by the way. Really, Jimmy, we really need to say this. When we have primatologists and anthropologists who look at the footage and say that this is in no way consistent with any kind of a ape, a gorilla, or anything like that, everything's completely wrong. What are they comparing it to when they say that? Think about that. Philosophically, the comparison is being made to known animal species. If a experienced anthropologist or primatologist, not to say that their testimony should be discounted. Actually, I still maintain that they're among the best to offer an opinion on this kind of a thing. But in the past, those who have been dissuaded or have believed that the Patterson Gimlin footage is a fake based on the fact that it does not bear similarity to known species, I'm thinking, well, no duh. I mean, big surprise, because if this is indeed something that is not quite human, but damn close to it, but a little step toward our other primate brethren around the world and throughout history, then, yeah, in likelihood, there are going to be problems, just like maybe if an anthropologist back in the 1850s, or earlier, had been shown a photograph of, something along the lines of a silverback gorilla, and they were said, okay, tell us about this. Or if they were shown a drawing of it, or some sort of a representation that left them to have to determine whether or not it was real, they probably would have had the same issues and said, this isn't in keeping with this, and this in regard to known primates. It's funny to me that these are the kinds of arguments that are used against the veracity of the Patterson-Gimlin footage, when, again, you would expect there would be things inconsistent to an extent, within a reasonable margin, of error in relation to a perceived primate or hominid species that may exist but is as yet unidentified and accounted for by science. That is an important point, I think, that needs to be made when people who are experts look at this footage and say, yeah, this isn't consistent with these varieties of ape species. It's probably not one of those varieties of ape species. We're looking at something very different.
Let's, what do you think before we move on? And we're running out of time, and I've got calls backed up. I don't know what to do. Perplexed. It could be worse. Well, this is, okay, because I got to get to the Brown Mountain Lights. It is just a fascinating subject. This is Dino. Dino, welcome.
Oh, welcome. I have to recover after I didn't realize last week you were going to put me on firing line with Barra.
Hey, now. You did great.
You should. Luckily, I had my cheat sheet with me. But at any rate, I can't add much tonight. Hello, Mr. Micah.
Yeah, your name has been a big controversy.
I did want to put 2 cents in. What happened was there is a gentleman I know who used to work as a lab tech in a, let's just say, a major medical facility in the Bay Area. And he told me recently that once someone, since we're talking about Bigfoot, I'm still open-minded about Bigfoot, but he said someone brought in a hair sample for them to analyze. Now, this guy is a nice guy, but he is kind of a skeptic. He doesn't like to talk about UFOs or conspiracies. He goes, I don't care. So he's one of these guys that is afraid of it. But he claims that nothing of the hair sample came out substantial or of significance. And the other thing that I wanted to say was my father was big with horses, and he had cattle, and he had been up in the mountains. And one thing about that Patterson-Gimlin film is you can't fake how those were pretty seasoned trail horses that they had up in the Sierras, and how that horse was freaking out and almost bucked him off.
Good point. Yeah, that's an extremely good point. Yeah, that the horses did appear to be actually acting as one would expect them to respond to something that truly and suddenly frightened them. Yeah.
And they were, trail horses. It's like even a bear might have made them nervous, but that horse was literally almost like a bucking horse. It wanted to get out of there.
And another thing too is Gimlin has maintained that, and let's look at this for what it is. It's just a statement. But what he always said was that he said that this thing, as it was walking away, it seemed like it was angry. This animal was not happy. And as she was walking off, he said, I had a gun ready to be drawn on her at any time. He says, when you see something walking away that looks like a human, you are not compelled to shoot it, but you essentially are ready to protect yourself. And he said, if that had been a person in a suit and Patterson had been playing a prank on me, I wasn't in on it, and he was putting somebody's life in danger because I was prepared to defend us. Yeah. So there's a lot of things about that case that we have to really take into consideration. And again, I think, frankly, that the compelling evidence for rather than against actually outweighs the cons.
Well, also with Gimlin, this is another point that really needs to be driven home. If it was a hoax, then he was not part of the hoax. Okay, he because he's maintained his story for so long. In that he was there to defend. He was a bodyguard for Patterson. He was there. He was armed in case anything happens. You shoot him. Well, if that was a guy in a monkey suit, right, and Gimlin freaked out for it, he would have shot. He would have shot the perpetrator.
Yeah. Let's be.
Well, do you guys understand what I'm trying to say here?
Oh, no, I understand. Yeah. And then to add on to that, the fact that let's do a little psychology here. You, Jimmy, me, and you've been in the media, and me, and people that have been around. If you've lived to be over 50 and you did something in your younger days, eventually you can't keep it, and you're going to tell someone, boy, did I really get that Gimlin guy. At some point you're going to tell someone, and that's never happened.
No, and that suit has never surfaced. Okay, let's not beat that one around. Let's think about that for a second. That suit would have surfaced. Somebody would have blown this out. There's too many people involved in the conspiracy. And what's his name? Chambers, that says he made that suit in 1968 for that. Well, how come he didn't make the same suit for Planet of the Apes? Why did his expertise...
His art went downhill.
Yeah. Why did his expertise leave the house? Hey, Dino, thank you, my brother.
I'll be listening tomorrow night. Thank you.
You're the best. You're the best. You know what I mean? Why did he suddenly forget how to make a great ape suit when Planet of the Apes was in production? He just went downhill.
Yeah, it's funny. And funny again that yet again there's another of 3 individuals or so now, maybe more, that are claiming that they were involved in the creation of that suit. Why can't we get one clear, consistent story, from that skeptical perspective? Again, it's funny to me that the skeptics seem to be willing to accept any or numerous accounts as long as they're a skeptical account of how that thing was made.
And then you have the flip side, Micah. We still don't have a body. Don't have a skull. We don't have a fingernail. We don't have anything. It's weird. It's weird. It's bizarre.
That's why I maintain a stance of neutrality. I'm on the fence. I have not seen that physical evidence, and I think that scientifically, can I tell you that a Bigfoot exists? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah. I'm going to say, well, there's compelling anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, I had Jeffrey Meldrum on the show, and I told him before he was on the show, I said it while he was on the show. I said, look, I'm on the fence. You are here to convince me.
Yeah.
Okay? And when he found out about my belief in the Patterson film, and it goes way beyond just what the Patterson film is. It goes beyond that. But when he's like, so Jimmy, what gives? Well, look, you still don't have a body. You don't have a body. I don't care about footprints. I mean, why hasn't a car run one down? And I always hear the excuse, you don't find bear carcasses. But I've seen bears.
Yeah, right.
You can go to the zoo and see bears. I don't care about that. So anyway, before we run out of time, I know that the Brown Mountain Lights, everybody, I'll open up the phone lines here in a few minutes. Okay, so everybody that's on hold, just stay patient or call back. The Brown Mountain Lights are about an hour from your house. So how many times have you been down there? And let's just start right there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and I know time is running nigh, but I'll come back on sometime. We could do a whole show about that subject because that's something I'm intimately involved with. An hour from my house is the beautiful scenic Linville Gorge. I've been down there more times than I can count, all throughout the gorge, but colloquially known as the Brown Mountain Lights. These apparent illuminations tend to appear down there, and they seem to be something akin to ball lightning. Now, I have only on a couple of occasions seen anything that I thought maybe was worthy of consideration as being the purported phenomena. I've got a lot of really good friends who are really, really good skeptical researchers, a geologist, Ed Spear, Dan Caton, physicist and astronomer at App State University, a few other people too, who I've worked with in recent years. And the determination that basically we all have different ideas. Dan Caton, I think, thinks that there is indeed some sort of a ball lightning-like phenomena. My friend, the geologist, is more apt to think that this is all just misidentification of natural, or prosaic phenomena. I had been willing to accept a far more skeptical stance on this, but as with other phenomena, the anecdotal data continues to support the idea that certain people are seeing interesting things. And I do have 2 associates, colleagues of mine from Pennsylvania that used to work with Bell Laboratories, Bill Fox and Bob Ashmore, good friends of mine. They come down about every other summer and spend time camping, hiking, and doing photography up there in the gorge. And they've managed to get some damn good photographs that even my skeptical friends and in the research community that we get together and we discuss this stuff from time to time, we have not been able to rule out the possibility that these seem to indicate an actual phenomenon, some sort of a light. Maybe like what John Derr and Michael Persinger and Robert Theriault and some of these earth light researchers would call earthquake lights. Who knows? But there seems to be a phenomena in that region.
What the first time you were there, what did you see?
The first time I went down to Brown Mountain, I didn't see a whole lot. The second time I went down, I think I saw an orb of orangish yellow to white colored light moving through the sky that just vanished. And looking back, I'm pretty sure that was the International Space Station entering the Earth's shadow. But more recently, there was an actual instance where I hiked to the top of Table Rock, and my brother, myself, actually this was a few years ago, but I still say more recently than those previous experiences, Dr. Chris Blake, who's a scholar in the region there, and a couple of other individuals along with myself, we hiked to the top of Table Rock, and from the top of Table Rock, still in daylight, it was about dusk, we could see a red light that appeared down in the gorge and then traveled followed the path of the Linville River as it flowed along. And they'd appear and they'd follow the river, and this happened about 3 times very quickly in quick succession. I don't know if it was an optical trick or if there was something going on, but we all seemed to have seen something and described it as a red illumination down there in the gorge. It didn't look like it was a laser or something like that. It didn't have that appearance, and being still daylight out, it didn't seem to me that a laser would be visible under those circumstances. So I couldn't tell you what that would be. It certainly would have been visible at night. You know, I haven't had the most compelling sightings, but, you know, I know people who have, and the photos that have been shown to me do seem to suggest and support the idea that there is something going on. And really, maybe at a future time, we could spend more time talking about it because, I mean, there's a lot to be said about Brown Mountain and what may be going on. And yes, in the very true sense of the word, while I believe it's a natural phenomenon, I think that these do fall under the jurisdiction of unidentified flying objects, at least loosely put.
Now, you went down there with your telescope, too, didn't you?
I have not yet. I actually have a really nice, about a 45 to 55 power refractor telescope. And a lot of people, I think, who are astronomers would laugh and be like, what are you going to do with a refractor? Well, a refractor allows you to be able to maintain, you know, a visual that remains properly oriented vertically. In other words, it's still upright, unlike a Newtonian or a Dobsonian or a reflector telescope. I bought a refractor, and also you don't have to collimate the lens of a refractor telescope as often as you do like a reflector. It can be more easily transported, and it gives you a better sense optically of what you're actually looking at, both for land and sky viewing. It may not be the most optimal telescope for purpose of astronomy, but actually I find it's quite good, even with its magnification settings. But yeah, the long-term goal is actually to take camera equipment utilized in conjunction with the telescope down there and try and observe from Wiseman's view with this great big huge telescope set up right there, so that if a light shows up, we can, by God, get a good look at it.
Well, I'm confused. You've seen stuff. You've certainly seen photographic evidence. We all have. But you've seen it in person. Why would you jump to a natural phenomenon conclusion so quickly? I mean, I feel that's where you want to go.
It's where I want to go, but I wouldn't call it a conclusion. You know, I couldn't say that I have a conclusion yet because there's not enough data yet. I think that there is. I think that what we perceive at Brown Mountain is consistent enough with reports of things along the lines of ball lightning and earthquake light phenomena that I would begin there in terms of a hypothesis as to what may be going on. But if I get up close to the Brown Mountain lights and you know, a beam shoots out of the thing and an antenna is produced, that leads me to believe that there's something else going on. Of course, you know, with the appearance of new data, we would have to essentially reform our hypotheses, and our expectations, you know, should change just as well as to what we think we're dealing with. You know, again, I think I have expectations based on the reports that people have shared with me over the years, but those reports are still, you know, they're still inconclusive, and so I cannot tell you that I have a conclusion. I certainly don't, because there's not enough data yet to draw a firm, verifiable conclusion based on what the data actually dictates, which is irrefutable. We don't have that.
How big are these balls of light?
They're often described as being roughly the size of a basketball or maybe a beach ball, typically white in color, but they'll sometimes kind of change through different colors in the spectra, you know, from white to orange to red, green, blue. Orange and white are typically the descriptions. They can sometimes just appear on a ridge line. Sometimes they will hover. I'm not really particularly interested in the ones that just appear on a ridge line. People say that they see lights that never move all the time down there. The interesting reports to me are the ones that move through the sky, that travel, that move in ways that are inconsistent with aircraft. For example, I do know that there's an airport off in the distance, and when weather conditions are right, you can very easily see a craft moving, you know, into the field of view and moving, and you can determine, you know, okay, that's an airplane. based on the flight path that is expected of a plane leaving from the runway from this particularly small airport. Very predictable. Whereas these lights sometimes behave in a very different way. For example, they'll take off and they are even described as behaving a lot like Roman candles, and that would have to be something a little different, I think. So now, again, what could account for that? Who knows? And I wouldn't rule out people actually over there shooting off fireworks and playing, as the locals say, playing Brown Mountain lights. Maybe there's something more going on. Maybe a lot of it's even hoaxes, But I'm interested in certain varieties of phenomena that are observed down there, and especially those that don't seem consistent with aircraft and other things that are known objects moving throughout the air.
Is it seasonal?
Yeah, there is definitely it seems that in this time of the year, we're getting into the prime viewing season, that the fall seems to be when more people report seeing these objects down there in the gorge.
Electrical phenomena seems interesting.
Yeah.
Well, then you had the story, the guy that owned the store, with the alien, that he had the body in the back, and he would talk about going, I can't remember his name. What was his name?
Was that Ralph Lale, the guy who had the body in the back of his shop there? Yeah, Ralph Lale. Yeah, he was an old mountain man. And see, the body in the back of the shop, I got to tell you, I'm pretty sure that was a mummy, a dummy mummy, in fact, that was made by a sideshow effects creator called Homer Tate. Homer M. Tate was his name, and he actually had catalogs where you could order these little kind of paper mache with a little mud and a few, little animal teeth and things added for effect. These little mummies. He had a little man from Mars, a little jungle man, Egyptian mummies. He literally made mummies that could be featured in, variety shows and sideshows and things. And the thing that Ralph Lale had in the little coffin there in the back of his shop, without question, looked almost identical to one of Homer Tate's mummies. And I've actually been in touch with Ralph Lale's grandson, who's emailed me a couple of times and has said that he is hoping to try and find out if somebody in the family may still have the quote-unquote space mammy, as he called it.
Well, that combined with the phenomena that is obviously going out there. I mean, there's been reports about it for years. And his stories about, I'm going to go hang out with my spaceman guys, I'll be back. And he would disappear. I mean, it just added, I hate to say the oldest adage in the world, fuel to the fire. But they seem to go together, and he seemed to be very believable. And all of the locals listened to his stories, and I don't think anybody really dismissed what he was saying.
Maybe they didn't, but I think that I've asked people who met Ralph Lale. For instance, I think he had a niece named Virginia who I've emailed and corresponded with, his grandson, or maybe it's his nephew, I'm sorry. Actually, I heard from him again just the other day. Every couple of years I get an email from the guy. It's amazing how many people have read about my interest in this, and members of the family or people who knew him, have contacted me and shared their stories. But people who knew him, they said that Ralph was a character. He was certainly an old guy. He loved to spin yarns and tell these stories. His story had been that there were these beautiful, scantily clad women from the planet Tiwam that were the aliens that existed in a hole in the ground, beneath the Limble Gorge, beneath Brown Mountain. And you got to keep in mind too that those stories were becoming popular in conjunction with the stories that were also popular around that time, beginning in the 50s and carrying on through the 60s, of the UFO contactees, George Adamski and people like this, who often perceived the alien extraterrestrial component as being interactions with beautiful humans, from another planet. I see a lot of parallels with Ralph Lale's stuff. And when Nick Redfern wrote his book on contactees, he actually interviewed me about Ralph Lale. And he's even kind of lumped into that subculture, and I definitely think that there are a lot of parallels.
Let's just grab, I feel so bad about this. One phone call, and that's it. And then Micah's got to go. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church and Micha Hanks. Who's calling? Where are you calling from?
Jimmy, R.J. Cole from the Arctic. How are you?
Randy J. Cole. I saw your picture the other day, your official law enforcement garb. It was pretty intimidating.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but that was it. Yeah, that was the last one.
Bulletproof vest and all. Go ahead. What have you got for Micah really quick?
Well, I just posted on Twitter the little piece that Josh, a video from Brown Mountain that was basically taken by History Channel. They sent it in, had it his cameras inspected to make sure they were working right. Anyway, it's an interesting video. I was going to ask him what he thought of that. I mean, had he ever seen it? The blue light that appears on the night vision camera.
Yeah, I actually have to say, yeah, I saw it. I was there the night it was filmed, and I was part of that crew. And if you watch if you watch that episode of Paranatural that was on the National Geographic Channel, you know, I had longer hair, but I was actually on that episode with Joshua, along with Christopher McCollum. Christopher McCollum is the co-host of my other podcast, Middle Theory. He was actually there just as well. Here's what my take is on that. Josh and I are friends, and we will always remain friends. And he's a great guy and a great friend, but we did disagree on that. And I'll give you full disclosure. I did not think that was a actual phenomenon. I felt that was some sort of a reflection as a result of some sort of a light leak with that camera that was being used, because it was a slightly crude setup that was being utilized to attach the cameras to the IR scopes, and I believe it involved Velcro. Now, it was functional, but again, I'd say it was just slightly crude, and I think that it left a little bit of possibility that a reflection could occur. Now, what was done is that a laboratory called Princeton actually completed a video analysis. We were never given the results of the analysis that I know of that was completed by Princeton Labs, and there was a misconception at the time that Princeton University had actually done the analysis. That was not true. It was a laboratory called Princeton Labs, a photo lab. And on the program that when we watched it and it aired that night, that's the first time that we saw their conclusion, and they said that they didn't know what it was. But that didn't necessarily mean that because they didn't know what it was, that it was something anomalous. So I remember that night I was a little, upset because I felt like the program didn't really do a good enough job really trying to explain what we may have captured on footage, and therefore it was very open to question to me, and most probably some sort of a reflection or something along those lines. Yeah, I know that Joshua felt differently, but that's okay, because I think that really good research has to involve differing opinions, because that's how we sharpen our argument. But I was there that night, and my personal feeling is that wasn't necessarily the phenomena that we would call the Brown Mountain Lions.
Randy, anything else? Because I have a follow-up question. Randy, before I let you go, do you have anything else for Micah?
Yeah. Micah, tell Jimmy there that it would be a good idea to have Dr. Fortune on his show.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy, you need to get Dr. Fortune. Yeah, Joshua Warren was the guy that introduced me to Dr. Fortune, and, I always appreciate that because, he's a fascinating guy, and, boy, he's got a good story to tell with regard to this EMP stuff.
Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Great show tonight, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you, Randy.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What did you see? Because we've all seen that film. I just watched it again. What did you see?
That's the thing. We did not see anything with our naked eye. There was nothing visible with the naked eye. That was captured using a pair of infrared goggles that were actually, it was an infrared scope that was hooked up to a camera. And Dean Morrison, the fellow who was filming, wonderful guy. We had such a good time up there that night. And now, one thing I'll say is that we didn't see anything with our naked eye. The infrared scope managed to capture that. Again, some people feel that is a more legitimate phenomena. I simply do not, because I think that there are too many possibles in terms of ways that could have been achieved by accident and as a result of something prosaic. But there was one other story about what happened while we were up there filming that night. I'm often asked about those two things, that piece of footage and then this next story that Joshua Warren, I think, had discussed on an interview, where allegedly MIB showed up and drove by and filmed us, and somebody had said, "Oh, come on, Micah, that story can't be true. Really, would you mind, telling us the truth?" And I said, "No, actually, I was standing right next to Joshua. He and I were talking, unloading equipment from the back of a vehicle, and what happened was what looked like I think if I remember correctly, it was like an SUV that had a Commonwealth of Kentucky driver's plate on it, license tag, drove by, and there was a fellow with a bill cap and a beard in the passenger front seat, and another man driving, and there may have been people in the back seat too, but as they drove by, they rolled down the window, and he held up a little camera, like it looked like a 35mm single lens reflex type camera, and he snapped pictures of us as he drove by. And they circled right through the parking lot, taking pictures, never stopped, never said hi, never waved, took our picture and drove off. They were not men in black suits. It wasn't a black vehicle with windows or anything like that. It was a Park Service vehicle with a Commonwealth of Kentucky tag. But I thought that was a really strange...
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah, and so people have tried to refute that. I'll tell you this. I was there the night the footage was made, and while I'm skeptical of the footage, I'm not skeptical of the guys that drove by and took our picture, because Josh and I stood there, watched them as they drove through and did it, and then Josh looks at me and goes, well, what the hell was that all about?
Yeah, Josh told me that story on the air.
Yeah.
And he said that was the most bizarre thing. I think he said it was a van, but maybe it was an SUV. But yeah, he said they just rolled by and started taking pictures of us and then left. I was like, did you get the license plate? Did you chase it down? Yeah.
We didn't get the number, but it was definitely a Kentucky license plate with a national. It was, I believe, it was a Park Service vehicle, and you know, we all saw that. And I was up there recently with a friend of mine, who's a mutual friend of mine and Josh's, Cindy Peters, and she maintains and operates the Parkview Lodge there in Linville Falls, which is the nearest, hotel to the Wiseman's View location for viewing. And as I was talking with Cindy, we were leaving the parking lot. We'd been up there at a viewing together one night. Didn't end up seeing anything that night, but she says to me as we were getting in our car, she says, Micah, before you go, do you remember that night when you guys were up here filming and those men drove through? And she described it and remembered it exactly as I did. And it was a very strange circumstance. So who knows what they were up there doing and what these Park Service guys in a vehicle with a tag from another state, what they were doing, photographing us and driving by and doing that for. Who knows? That was definitely an interesting experience, though.
Before I let you go, I want to find out you're always speaking across the country. You do a lot when it comes to that. I want to get to that in a second. Have you ever had a Men in Black experience? Have you ever had anything kind of feel a little bit funky? Anybody out in front of your house? Anything like that?
I did have a white van parked out in front of my house that was apparently doing some sort of work, but there was no logo on the van, and I'd always wondered about that. The weirder experience, and this is, I guess, the one I'll leave you with, I was contacted by an individual a few years ago who had said that they'd seen a UFO, and they even supplied me with some drawings and everything, and took extreme interest in my various programs that I do, my Grayling Report podcast. And one evening, this individual contacted me and said, you and I need to talk about an MIB. And I said, okay, sure. And they sent an email and explained that they had been unloading a shipment in Chinatown, I believe, Chicago. And this was on an evening in like December several years ago, and it was very cold. And this would have been right around the same time that I'd been in correspondence with this individual. And they said that a large black vehicle drove by in front of their car, and it looked like an old 4-door, with suicide doors, or I think is how it was described. This old model vehicle. Well, anyway, he said that he unloaded the stuff, and that when he got back out, that this vehicle was parked in, blocking him from being able to leave, and that he said standing in front of the driver's side door to his big rig had been a little man, standing there in a black suit, wearing these goofy-looking glasses. And as he got up to this individual, he felt a little threatened, a little intimidated by him, and said, what do you want? And this individual purportedly said to him in a something of an accent, a kind of foreign-sounding accent, he says, "You're to stop talking to Micha Hanks, or you will hear from me again." And I said, "No, you wouldn't pull my leg, would you?" And the fellow said, well, he says, I even wonder if what I saw really happened. Who knows? But he says, if I see this guy again, I'm going to either, have a camera or I'll be packing something else, And, but I'll tell you this is the weird part. I never heard from him again after that. We had been in regular contact before that. That was the last time I ever heard from that individual. And so, I hear weird stories like that from time to time. And, I couldn't tell you what to make of them. I think Nick Redfern's had even weirder stuff happen since he started writing books about Men in Black. But whether or not that happened directly to me, I think it's a fairly close approximation of a personal MIB story.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Just constant correspondence. Everything's cool. Then that incident, and then nothing. Yeah, that's that's something to ponder there, Micah. That's a good one. That's one of the better MIB stories I've ever heard. That's cool.
We're glad to share it with you.
All right. So what do you got going on?
Oh, goodness. In a few weeks, I'll be at the Paradigm Symposium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'll be emceeing with Scotty Robertson, also lecturing.
There's like 100 people speaking at that.
Yeah, it's a really big conference. Yeah, I know. It blows my mind, really, how many people there are. Eric Von Daniken, Richard Dolan, Graham Hancock's going to be there, Thomas Fusco, John Anthony West, Robert Bivall. It's going to be a good lineup. So looking forward to that. I've relaunched my Middle Theory podcast at middletheory.com. And, of course, I'm always doing Grayley Report and my other radio show. And, in fact, as soon as I finish this, I'm going on another podcast and recording with them tonight. So I literally never sleep. But I'm going to tell you, Jimmy, it has really been awesome being on with you, and I hope I can come back sometime. This has been a tremendous amount of fun, and I really enjoy your energy. We've got to do it again.
Thank you, Micah. All the best.
And likewise to you, my friend.
Take it easy, man. Thank you, Micah.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening to you. Thank you, Micah. All right, there you go. Wow, that was fun. And I was looking forward to Micah coming on the show for so long, and it was everything for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to take a quick break. I am just about toasted. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Oh, geez. Let me adjust some knobs. All right, you know what? I've got 5 minutes left. I'll take one phone call when I come back. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR, in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com. On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, man, my brain is mud. Micha Hanks. I didn't even get a chance to go in about 20 directions I wanted to go into. I'll take one. Look, all those phone calls came out. I'll take one phone call really quick. I'll take one phone call right now. 323-825-5045. One of the Fadernauts. Yeah, one of the Fadernauts call in. Woo, man, Micah. Oh, geez. I got to say, there was a couple of things that I wanted to mention that he was, that we were talking about. One, Bigfoot. I'm not sure. He's a skeptic. One of the things that Micah talks about a lot, he approaches everything, no matter what the subject is. He approaches as a skeptic first. And he's a serious researcher, and he's a believer, and about a lot of different things. But he approaches everything as a skeptic. I'm a little bit. I'm not sure about his stance on Bigfoot. I thought that was a little bit bizarre. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. Who's calling? You're live on Fade to Black. Who's calling? Are you there? You are 1, 2, 3 gone. Okay, let's see here. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, call back. Call back. He's on the fence, and I think he has the same position that I do, which is we have that Patterson film. It's there. I mean, that is the most beautiful footage. It's right there. But we don't have a body. And for everybody that wants to debunk the Patterson film, you can't debunk that film. What is there to debunk? What is there to debunk? You go outside, you photograph a car rolling past you on the street, and you look at it and you say, "Hey, man, there's a car." No, it's not a car. I mean, what is there to debunk in the Patterson footage? Hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. Who's calling?
Jimmy. How you doing? Hey, suggestion on your chair. Bacon grease.
Well done. That would probably work. Bacon grease would work. How are you doing tonight?
The doc will definitely like it.
So what'd you think of the show tonight, Bear?
It was great. You know my position on Bigfoot because I talked to you about it before. So
Sure.
But yeah. It was a great show, and I really appreciate it. And I watch, what's going on. So it's just like, I don't know if you know it or not, but there was over the weekend a couple of F-18s crashed near the Bay Area.
Is that right? I didn't. Out. It was out in the ocean, though, right?
Right.
Yeah, I read that last week. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe that might have something to do with some of the sightings or something that may have been going on. But there's been some, have you heard about the Google barge out in the bay?
Yep, seen it.
Yeah, isn't that scary?
It's big.
Darn right. Boy, I tell you, it is really big.
Yeah, I saw.
Anyway, I thought I'd call in and make a suggestion. Bacon.
Thank you. Thank you, Bear. You have a good night, man. I'll see you tomorrow night.
You too. All right.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
All right, let's just, I got time for one more. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. Who's calling? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Nick from California.
Oh, hi, Nick. How are you? You got cut off earlier.
Good. Yeah, that was my bad. Yeah, I was just wanting to ask, I didn't really understand when Micah was talking about the Brown Mountain.
Right.
I didn't know exactly what that, do you think, could you elaborate a little bit on like what that is exactly?
Yeah, the Brown Mountain Lights in that part of the country, in the mountains there, which we're talking over on the east side of Tennessee, and or is it? Technically, is it in West Virginia? Is it in Tennessee? I'm always confused about that. Somebody will straighten me out here in a second. But the lights have been seen. Some say that it is the spirits, Indians. There could be a connection there. Some say it's UFOs visiting. It's ET. Like he was saying, it could be some kind of electric phenomena from the grounds there. But no matter what, the lights have been seen for a long time. And some go along the valley floor. Some rise up out of the valley floor. Some are seen high in the sky. I've heard reports of red, white, yellow, blue. I don't. The phenomenon certainly, Nick, is real. There is something going on in the Brown Mountains. What it is ultimately, we haven't been able to nail it down. But it is almost a daily occurrence, a nightly occurrence. They occur during the day, and they occur during the night. I've had many listeners on this show contact me. I've had them call in. They have seen them in person, and they've lived with them for decades. There is a movie out. It's called Alien Abduction. You should go check that movie out. You could probably find it on Netflix now. Alien Abduction. That is about the Brown Mountain Lights. So it's a real phenomenon. It's real. It's definitely real. What it is, we just don't know.
That's pretty strange that you say that, because I've seen that movie actually just this year, and I didn't really know that it was like based on real events like that.
Yes, exactly. It's a pretty crazy story. It absolutely is. Hey, Nick, I got to run. We're at the end of the evening. Thank you for calling back. I'm sorry you got cut off earlier.
It's okay. Good show today, and thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay.
All right. That wraps up another night here on Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, don't forget, who do we have? Tomorrow night is Courtney Brown, and we are going to be dealing with some revolutions about 9/11 and some remote viewing, new stuff, brand new tomorrow night. Thank you to Micha Hanks and everybody that called in tonight. Stay tuned. Coming up next is The Unexplained, followed by Expanded Perspectives, and I think on one of those shows is going to be Micha Hanks. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Leslie Johnson III, Hilton J. Palm, and Mark D. Kovar. The announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Music is this guy right there, Doug Aldrich. Show intros performed by Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your humble host, Jimmy Church. I will see everybody tomorrow night. Courtney Brown right here. Be safe. See ya.